Do, 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 do. And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the stream. We're going to give a few moments for people to get in here, but I hope everybody's having a good Sunday so far. We're going to be finishing up the Alien Biospheres series. You know, this is a fan favorite, a personal favorite of mine for the channel. I really did enjoy this series. This goes up there with the, all the like Christian denomination series and things like that of like series that I really enjoyed doing throughout this time. So I do appreciate you guys for being on this journey with me as well. We learned, we get to, learn a lot of stuff here. We learned a lot during this series. Pretty much a lot of things that really affect our lives, and then it turns out this was something to be like, hey, you guys should watch out. Turns out life is actually pretty crazy, and these things that are affecting this planet, this is how it affects us in real life. So that was fun to realize that he was talking about us the whole time. I thought he was just talking about a fictional planet. Turns out we were the subject the whole time. So who knew? Fun times there, ladies and gentlemen. Fun times there. So yeah, guys, I hope everybody's doing well. Again, we are just going ahead and getting into this series. Anybody in the chat so far? Where? I'm here. You're here. Oh, wow. You are here. Congrats. Yes, you are here. So let me go ahead and get this started. Give me 1 second here. We're going to go ahead and get started with Alien Biospheres. And let me know if you can hear this. Okay, a lot of talking is directly related to our world in terms of how evolution works. Yes. Jordan, you're also here. Yes, we have people here. And also let me know if you guys can hear this, by the way, when I get started.
This alien planet is brought to you by Campfire. Campfire is an online tool suite that offers everything you need.
Were you guys able to hear that, right? It's not like last time where we weren't able to hear from the beginning. This is like a fully hearing episode. Is that correct?
To write up and organize your stories and world-building projects. Campfire includes a
well.
bevy of modules to let you
So
catalog all the
fun.
details of your world-building, including character sheets, relationship
Campfire.
webs.
Guys, make sure you support Campfire. If you're in this chat, if you can, try to support Campfire. Yes, we can here. I love seeing that in the chat. Try to support Campfire, ladies and gentlemen, if you can. It's a great resource. There's tons of things you can do with it. The holidays are coming up. It might be a good subscription for someone that you know in your life to check out Campfire.
Timelines, story arcs, maps, species, languages, and much more. And you can also find in-depth tutorials and free resources on all sorts of writing and world-building topics on Campfire's blog. Plus, you can share your work and collaborate with others, and even read and purchase books published on the platform. Campfire's free version already comes with more than enough features for most projects.
I guess speaking of sharing, you guys can share this whole thing, this stream. I guess you can send the share, and that's what a good YouTuber would say in this situation, right, guys? Right, chat? Like they would tell people to subscribe. So yeah, go ahead and subscribe, comment, like all the fun stuff down below that YouTube forces me to tell you guys to do. If it was up to me, I would just be chill. But YouTube, they got the, they're over here. Whoa, buddy, you gotta be upping those subscriptions. You gotta be making sure people know. Shout out the Patreon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if anybody ever goes there, but yeah. There's that as well, a whole bunch of fun stuff. So yeah, he's doing this little advertising. I figured I might as well throw in some advertising as well. Your boy likes to advertise a little bit. Shout outs to once again.
But to unlock even more, Campfire has a flexible pricing structure where you only pay for the modules you need. ranging
Only
from
the stuff I
subscriptions as
need.
low as a few cents a month to lifetime purchases.
Now, is this price gonna go up after about a year or two, like my internet bill did? Crazy stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Internet bill went up like $40 out of nowhere, ladies and gentlemen. Real life facts. I'm telling you, it is so wild in a situation, and I'm like, what the heck is this? It sucks. I'm not gonna say the name of the provider, but you know who you are. You know what you did. That's wild. I don't know why you would do that. That's, give me a break here. We're just normal people here. We're all trying to make our way around this world here. Let's not have our internet bills go up like crazy.
And a massive thanks to Campfire for sponsoring this series for all these years, and for helping to make absurdly long videos like this one possible. To sign up for Campfire or to learn more, check out the link in the description.
All right, let's get to it. Real stuff here, guys. Pay attention. Get locked in, everybody.
In the last episode, the planet Tira 292b underwent the greatest cataclysm in its history, in which the vast majority of terrestrial and marine life was wiped out.
Yes.
And from the ashes arose a new world teeming with a totally new assemblage of clades.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to say a quick RIP to all the clades that we did lose. So again, RIP, we still have, actually we didn't lose as many plants as I did expect. I kind of thought like this whole row here, well, maybe not this whole row, but like, I kind of figured like these and like, maybe not this guy, but these would all be gone. These being here, still, and like the ones that we did have and the ones that evolved to become newer, I was surprised in this category, I'll be honest.
From the ashes arose a new world teeming with a totally new assemblage of...
This one lost a lot. These two clades here lost a lot. It's actually kind of insane how many they lost, but they were the bigger ones, so it does make sense.
Clades. But now...
Oh, also make sure you... Also, I forgot to mention this earlier. Make sure you go to the channel, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It would be wild if you're on the final part with me and you haven't subscribed to the channel. It would be actually insane. We did lose a lot of specific species, but again, RIP to all the ones we lost. This animation is really good, by the way. I really do like this animation here that I'm looking at here. So shout outs to this artist here.
Oh, 30 million.
Oh yeah, Pippi Million. I feel like I hear that, I see that name so often. I already knew it was going to be some great stuff when I saw this.
Years after the mass extinction. 420 million years after the emergence of the first anthostomes and polypods. Somewhere among the dizzying profusion of new diversity. One species will end up in the right place at the right time to stumble upon a unique set of adaptations that will let its descendants reshape the entire world.
Is this panel for sale? I like this panel. Like, from the start, it's just,
New assemblage of clades.
I had to go back to it, guys.
But now, 30 million years after the mass extinction,
I really
420 million...
I really like this. This is actually really
years
incredible.
After the emergence of the...
Because it's just the whole breakdown. Like, I feel like this is something you could have, like, printed out. You should have saved the Charles Darwin quote for this episode. Oh man,
the first anthostome.
You know what? Reuse the Charles Darwin quote. How about that? I'm gonna read it as if I hadn't seen it the first time, and I will give you a reaction similar, if not better, than the first time you put it in the chat. So whenever you feel like it's most necessary, go ahead and use the Darwin quote, and I will still read it as if I hadn't already done this part. This is like it's like an ongoing bit now between me and you, Anthrax, in the chat. It could be like our thing if you if that's how you want to see it. It's this is how we get locked in.
And polypods, somewhere among the dizzying profusion of new diversity. One species will end up in the right place at the right time to stumble upon a unique set of adaptations that will let its descendants reshape the entire world. Before we go any further, be aware that much of what we're about to discuss is very difficult to navigate with any certainty, especially when it comes to making firm, universally applicable predictions. This entire series is based on the premise that we can speculate about how life might evolve on other planets based on what we observe on Earth. But when it comes to Sapience, there's a lot about the situation on Earth that's not yet fully understood. Neurobiology, psychology, and human evolution are still the subject of ample research, and cognition in other animals is notoriously challenging to study and quantify.
And it feels like we're learning new things about other species all the time. That, like, the whole rules of animals is different from when I grew up. It's beautiful seeing the entire history of life on this planet. Countless forms of so beautiful and wondrous, all from a common ancestor. That's true. That's so true. It is beautiful. It's crazy how, like, one singular thing at one point, one singular microscopic creature created all life as we know it and all its variations and all the variations that it's had over the millions and millions of years that Earth has just been around. So, hey, shout out, for all the life that it's been available for Earth to have life, it just created all of it for us. So shout outs to that. But, like, the rules of animals, like, when I was young, I feel like they used to say fish don't feel pain. And I was like, why wouldn't fish feel pain? Now we're hearing plants feel pain. And plants send out sounds for when they do feel pain. It's like they send out all type of things. Now we know everything in life probably feels pain. There's things where we like, hey, is this sentient? We don't fully understand. Do they even know if rocks are fully, are like non-sentient creatures? And what does sentience mean? It's a whole thing. Alien Biospheres is alien vertebrates, spiders, strange snails, and slugs, and red plants, and I love it. Yeah, I do love the different variations that they've done throughout here. Even as speculative as it is, I do love how it feels so realistic. It feels like if somebody just told me there was a planet and they explained it like this, and we just found this planet, and this is the guy who just gave me the documentary, I would believe him. He could just tell me something. It's like, oh, this is actually non-speculative. And I'd be like, you know what? I trust him. The problem is I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that one. Humans arrogantly thinking we're the only ones who have this or that, but continuously proven wrong. That is true. We're always getting proven wrong. I guess it's slightly a good thing, because we're able to, like, change our perspectives. But the problem is some people hear the old information and they never follow up with the new information, and they only go by the first thing that they heard. So, we got to find better ways to communicate the new information towards the general public. I feel like more people need to know the whole plant thing, and not just me because I stayed up till 3 a.m. watching some YouTube stuff one time. That it's like not everybody's doing that. Other people have different things going on in their lives,
making speculation about Sapience difficult and prone to personal biases. This isn't helped by the fact that for much of its history, the study of Sapience has been plagued by anthropocentrism, as humans...
Anthropocentrism? I really should have continued this video before I read off your thing, because I couldn't pronounce the word when I saw it up the year. But then I heard it and I was like, that makes more sense, the way he pronounced it. So that's what we're all saying, that we were all thinking and saying the same thing. I felt like context clues got me to where I understood what it was, but it's good to hear it out. I should have just played the video for a little longer, but your boy, I had to yap a little bit. Sorry.
Have always been keen to think of themselves as the most intelligent and advanced form of life. And although modern biology has largely abandoned this idea, discussions of sapience still often fall victim to teleology, describing traits in terms of their eventual purpose rather than the selective pressures that prompted their evolution in the first place. As if every adaptation that occurred over the course of human evolution came about specifically to make sapience possible. But this overlooks the fact that evolution can't plan ahead and has no end goal. It's easy to fall for the trap of thinking of natural selection as a process of advancement, that species always get bigger, better, and smarter over time. But in reality, evolution only serves to make species better adapted to their immediate environment, which may not necessarily involve any increase in strength, intelligence, or even complexity. It may...
So, okay, real question. As far as intelligence, who do you think is smarter? Like, let's take out, I know we assume, let's take out the anthropocentrism, but let's just, take everything into account. Are humans really the smartest? Like, we are, like, paying taxes and stuff. Like, that's not the smartest thing to do. Like, we created currency and then we taxing people, and then we're actively making sure, like, some people are, like, dying because of the rules that we implemented on our own selves that don't even make sense in the natural world, right? But, let's say cats, for example. Are cats, not the smartest? They kind of live a pretty good life, and they don't even have to, like, give you all the love and attention a dog gives you. Ravens, elephants and ravens are really close. Dolphins, yeah, they, like, all those animals live pretty decent lives. I would say cats because they kind of get humans to do everything they want us to do, and they don't even fully respect us. And that's just like the icing on the cake of, like, if you're a cat, of like, hey, I don't even have to give this creature all the respect that the dog is over here giving them. I'm just going to be me and knock stuff over whenever I want to and still get all the food and treats and everything I want because I'm a cat, But not all cats can do that, Some cats don't get to live that life. So shout outs to the small cats that do get to manipulate people. It won't be me, though. What will people say that humans are the only thing that can build structures, but that's not true. I mean, look at, termites and, also octopus, ants, parrots, whales. Yeah, all these things are very smart creatures, and whales, I just found out whales go through a lot of stuff. I didn't know that whales had different, like, whale languages depending on where they lived. That's crazy that they have different languages of, like, hey, I'm a whale from Norway. I speak this tone, but you're a whale from, like, I don't know, the Pacific. All of a sudden, you don't know how I'm talking to you, but it's just, maybe you can learn it, but probably not because we don't mess with you like that. We don't like the way you talking. You sound weird to us, so we're not gonna help you. All of them are smart in different ways. True, all animals are smart. Orcas have different accents from where they come from. Yeah, was it just orcas or was it all whales? I thought it was all whales, but it might just be orcas. But orcas are like super. I feel like orcas are like super smart. And also, I think they're more dolphins than whales. So that's like another point for the dolphin right there. The key point is to be more humble, except we are not alone. Yes. Let's be humble to the other creatures out there. Maybe, the thing that we think of as intelligence, IQ, we don't know everything, people. We're learning that more and more every day. There's creatures that we don't even know about that's out there. Are they smart for being able to stay away from us for all these years? Probably. They might be some of the smartest creatures in the world if they stayed away from humans. I'll tell you that.
It may be tempting to think of animals like sponges and jellyfish as being primitive and lowly organisms, but their body plans are so effective that they've remained virtually unchanged for over 500 million years.
Jeez.
And their lifestyle of passively straining the water for food doesn't require any intelligence or behavioral complexity.
True.
So higher cognitive abilities would just be a waste of energy.
True.
With this in mind, it's fundamentally important to recognize that sapience is in no way the pinnacle of evolution, nor is it an inevitable outcome of natural selection, but is in fact no more guided or special than any other adaptation, just a curious quirk of the evolutionary pathway that humans happen to have taken.
It's just a coincidence. We just so happen to gain more, like, be like, okay, we're thinking about this. Okay, I'm 5 minutes behind at work, so I might be in and out for. You know what? Do your thing, bro. Do your thing. Whatever you got to do. Uh, I appreciate you for being in the chat, no matter what, though. But yeah, human intelligence, especially the scale that we're on, it's just more of a coincidence. It may not even be the best way to live life. Let's be honest here. This may be a coping mechanism to once again agree to why we have to pay taxes. We're so smart. That's why we have to pay taxes every year. Okay, buddy. I see your game here. This isn't the most effective way to live life, but we're going to cope about it.
But this begs the question of what sapience actually is, which proves to be very difficult to pin down precisely. Historically, the term intelligence has been used to describe the same concept, but in its broadest sense, intelligence is merely the ability to take in and retain information and to use it to solve problems.
Well, there's a bunch of animals that can do that, let's be honest. We all know a bunch of animals are able to, take in information and solve a problem. I've seen a dog do it. Dolphins don't have Jesus that we know of. That's true. I will give you that. God, I do believe, as well as Jesus Christ. So I will have to say, I give you that. Dolphins don't have that we are aware of, especially. Now, if there was any type of dolphin Christ situation that may have happened over the couple of thousands of years, and we didn't know about it, if all animal species had their run-in with the Lord and Savior, I don't know. Who's to say they don't? Brother, we're on the same page here. No, I do believe in God, though. So, elephants see humans as cute. Oh yeah, like how we see puppies and kittens. That's true. Now the problem is they're even their kids are hundreds of pounds. It's kind of hard to play with an elephant. So, it's kind of like the scales are tipped in their side. I personally think we should just be really nice to elephants, all times. They're one of the smartest creatures out there. They hold grudges, and they seem pretty chill. I feel like if we just had areas for elephants to relax in, we probably would have we could probably train them, and they could probably do a lot of good stuff out there, and for work. So I do, but evolution is fundamental. The world works just like gravity. Yeah, I don't see why you can't believe in both. You got to believe in God, but also there's fundamental laws in the world, and who put them in there? I don't know. We don't know how any of this starts, but it goes back to the same thing with if you go to religion or science. How does it all start? And the same question boils down to we actually just don't know. And it's probably the smartest thing to not try to super speculate on it. It might just be too much for our human brains to handle in its current capacity. Once we're ready for the answer, it will be there. That's what having faith is about. You don't have to have the proof in order to have faith, because if you have the proof, are you even being faith? Is that even faith at that point? And that's a whole nother argument. Plus, again, we are all part of one big family. That is true, because again, life, we all know, started, whether what you believe, there was one thing that created all species on Earth, and that means we're all part of one big family. We're all in it together. Every animal, plant, fungi, exactly, even microbe.
Which encompasses a huge range of behaviors seen across many species. Similarly, sapience is often confused with sentience, which is simply the ability to experience sensations, which, again, is applicable to many different animals.
True.
The fact is, there is no single coherent definition of sapience, but it can be very generally described as the capacity for cognitive abilities and behaviors comparable to humans, with a species capable of such abilities and behaviors sometimes being called a sophont. But of course, this definition is fundamentally anthropocentric. Why should humans be the gold standard for what counts as sapient?
True.
For one thing, alien sophonts would most likely use themselves as the benchmark for sapience.
True.
And for all we know, they might have cognition and behavior so different to our own that by their definition, humans wouldn't qualify as sapient.
Hey, Apano, what's going on? We got Apano in the chat. You know what? It's perfectly fine. We're glad to see you in here. We're just having a huge discussion about sapience, intelligence, life, just in general about what is sentience or sapience, or what is intelligence really. Are we the smartest, and why do we have to pay taxes? That's the question I keep bringing up, but I don't know if anybody else is I don't know how we're all doing about that one. Working on episode 7. Okay, let's go. Hey, let's let me know as soon as you get done with episode 7 so we can go ahead and add it back on. Because once again, the Apano series, if it's still upon us, we want to make sure it's we're checking it out here. So, but this is the final episode of the Alien Biospheres series. We may check out another one from this channel later, but I may also get back into another series or start up any other series here. Had some recommendations in the chat. But also, I do want to get back into more like funniest stuff. Might have like a live stream of just like music or something, or some type of like crazy, like not like a big movie because I don't want to get a copyright thing, but maybe some type of like a funny play or something like that. We may actually watch on stream coming up soon, but not gonna like completely go away from like the science and things, but obviously it's just gonna incorporate more of some other type of stuff into the live streams. You guys know he's doing a series about the sapient aliens build a coach. Oh, okay. Season 2 of Alien Biospheres. Okay, so season 2 of Alien Biospheres may also be we may actually have to go ahead and get the season 2 of Alien Biospheres then, because I really do enjoy this series, and especially if it's going to be more about the sapient creatures. Which, again, he did already give the warning that that's even more speculative and more difficult. And we're only at the very beginning, and it's already created so much conversation within us already. So that wouldn't actually probably would be a really good series to watch.
And for another thing, what does it actually mean for a behavior to be human-like? Centuries of anthropocentrism have fueled the pervasive misconception that there exists a single quintessential trait that separates humans from all other animals, whereas in fact cognition involves innumerable different variables, and it's only relatively recently that behaviors once assumed to be uniquely human have been found to be widespread in the animal kingdom. Not only are many species able to take in more information than humans, with a greater range and acuity of perception, but some also have a better ability to retain that information. African elephants have the spatial memory to recall the relative locations of landmarks spread out over hundreds of kilometers, even decades after visiting them. And corvids like scrub jays and Clark's nutcracker can not only memorize the location and contents of thousands of different food caches, but also the relative time at which they created each of them, and even whether or not they were being observed by other birds at the time. Some corvids also show advanced causal reasoning skills and an ability to plan ahead, not only using tools to solve immediate problems, but also storing them in anticipation of future situations that might require them. This so-called mental time travel, the ability to recall the past and envision the future, is even seen in some invertebrates. Some cephalopods have passed tests of delayed gratification, choosing to forgo an immediately available food reward if doing so will provide them with a higher quality food reward at a later point.
Oh, wow.
And Portia spiders are able to plan out the optimal pathway to approach their prey, even if that pathway is longer than the most direct route and takes
you're watching this while also drawing some of the clades for episode 7? That's hilarious. Finishing plants and working on bugs. If you have a bug that looks like me, that would kind of be weird, actually. Maybe not do that. If there's one that has a name inspiration or anything, that would be cool though. But don't let's not force it. It's gotta come out naturally if it does happen. But if not, the fact that you were able to continue to even do that while also listening to my nonsense at points is impressive enough, I'll tell you that.
Spider out of visual contact with their target, suggesting they possess a sense of object permanence. Chimpanzees, humans' closest living relatives, score much higher than humans on certain working memory tasks, suggesting that some areas of human cognition actually diminished on the path to sapience.
Oh wow.
Even rats have been shown to outperform humans in some cognitive tasks, and pigeons score higher than humans on certain probability puzzles, like the Monty Hall problem.
What is the Monty Hall
All
problem?
of this indicates that these different aspects of cognition represent wholly separate traits that evolve independently of each other, and that humans, rather than being maximally good at every possible aspect of intelligence, happen to have evolved a particular combination of traits that have led them to develop their civilization in the way they have, implying
now, are there more... What animals are more
that an
creative?
alien sophont...
What animals do you think are more creative than humans? Do you guys have, like, anything that you guys would think would be, like, a more creative animal? Like, I guess if I were going to put anything on the list, I would probably put something like cuttlefish or something, or like octopus, just the ones that can like change their actual colors and stuff, and like fit into their ants. You think ants are more? I guess ants would be like structurally creative or like artistically. I guess I'm thinking more artistically creative. Too many examples to give. It's probably right. Like I feel like creativity is also like a very open thing, you know. But one weird example is the pufferfish. Yeah, example. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think pufferfish are creative and kind of like how they're doing it, like what they're doing with their body and like how they're changing the look of their texture based off the things around them. It takes instant, like, let me, boom, on the spot. I got to think about something right quick. All right, that's right there. All right, I'm going to turn into that, escape, you know. It's some like real on the fly thinking. Especially when you think about animals in the wild, they're kind of like on their guard at all times, you know, biased thinking. It is everything that I say about animals, I will say is going to have a humanoid sapien bias to it, just because that's what I am. Creativity involves creating something novel. Okay. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, the idea of what creativity is kind of just like, you know, a little, it's a little different for everybody. Symbolism, like, is symbolism just because they can, like, communicate, some animals can communicate without speech? I don't know. You know, I don't know what they're, or is it just like things you're putting up on the wall, or like the fact that we create things that look like things, but maybe animals do the same in the wild? I don't know. Could
evolve a very different array of traits, and consequently, a very different way of interacting with the world around them. But if that's the case, then what criteria should we use to define sapience? One might point out that humans are the only species to make use of technology to alter the environment on a global scale, but there are many species capable of drastically modifying the landscape around them, with perhaps the most noteworthy example being eusocial insects like ants and termites, who employ technologies that rival those of many human societies, including complex architecture, air conditioning, agriculture, domesticated livestock, bridge building, and even rafting.
Whoa. When they start domesticating livestock, is that, like, again, something that I'm just not figuring out this one here. I'm sorry. I did not know they were doing livestock. That's a new one for me. Yeah, ants were creative. You were right about that. I didn't know they were on that level yet. They got other things doing things for them, like you know, let me find out ants got pets. I'm gonna be so upset to find out ants actually have pets. That's gonna be like the thing where I'm like, all right, bro, we need to pay more attention to what ants are doing in the world. They are having luxury items at this point. They have animals that they don't even feed. They just feed them for the love of the game at that point. I'm gonna need to know everything about ants at that point.
All without any complex thought at all. One could easily imagine a world where one such species reaches the point of completely transforming the entire planet, with vast cities and globe-spanning infrastructure that would be recognizably similar to human civilization, and yet the individual members of this species would be no more sapient than any other animal they shared their biosphere with. Instead, the entire population would collectively act as a single sapient superorganism. Just as how individual neurons have no intelligence in and of themselves, but work together to produce a thinking, feeling brain. Would a species like this count as a sophont? If we arbitrarily decide that the answer is no, then we need to identify what distinguishes humans' technological prowess from that of eusocial insects.
Yeah.
One major difference is that all of the staggeringly complex feats of engineering that ants and termites perform are innate behaviors, coded directly into their genes and enacted purely instinctively, meaning they don't require any conscious thought and can be carried out from birth like clockwork, while humans have to gradually learn all the skills they need to survive as they grow. Whereas
I mean, what if they're just really smart, like so much smarter than us, that they actually do learn this, but they just learn it really quickly? Like, what if they have the ability to learn within the womb, or like learn within their shell still, and then as like freaking small worm-looking creatures, they can still just like learn things somehow, and then as soon as they come out, they're already like, yo, I already spent like 4 years at Ant Harvard and stuff. Like, boom. Of course I know how to do this. It's not innate. It's not instinctual. I took time. I had to pass those classes. You know, they were going to put me in it was between this or be a soldier. You know, all the people who couldn't pass, they became soldier ants. Maybe that's how they figured it out. We don't know. Yeah, this series really does get you to think. But yeah, what is, what we think are innate behaviors? We don't know how to fully communicate with ants. So like we don't know how they learn or how quickly they learn. We see some ant documentaries and we think, oh, we know everything about ants. We don't. Already you're looking past human bias. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to look past the human bias that we have, because who knows, all the things we've been taught are slowly being updated or transformed into other things. You put it in a drawn circle and it will think it cannot cross over the circle, but it learns that it can survive doing this or whatever. It will then know it cannot be trapped. Okay. So, I mean, I've never experimented with that. I think I have seen it where you can like make a death circle with ants. I've never experimented with that, but that is a weird thing. But humans have weird things too. We have some weird behaviors. If you get one person in a crowded area to just start running, I bet you a whole crowd of people will start running without knowing what they're running about. It's just one of those things. You're here. Congratulations. Hey, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. Throw a like in the, throw down a like if you can. Make as many comments as you like. We're all having a good time. We're learning a lot right now, and we're doing a lot of conversating about this because it's very thought provoking. I will say that. And what is sentience and sapience, and how it actually, we're all taking our human bias out right now, by the way. If you're new in here, if you're just getting into the chat, we're taking away our human bias when we're looking at animal species, and we're trying our best here. This episode will explain those things we have, all those odd things we have. Okay. So we'll pay attention to this. We're getting locked in here.
Instinctive behaviors take millions of years to evolve. Learned behaviors can be acquired within an individual's lifetime, making them more adaptable to short-term changes. The downside is that, since they have no genetic basis, learned behaviors can't be automatically passed on to the organism's offspring, and need to be learned independently by every subsequent generation. Both innate and learned behaviors are found throughout the animal kingdom, and some...
Hold on, what are these non-human animal capacities? Let's see. Imprinting in ducks, migration birds, songs and songbirds, refer to alarms, calls and jaybirds, crows use tools and apes. Okay. Signature whistles, empathy. Rats have empathy? I didn't know that. Let's see. Human social capacities. What? Sucking, grasping reflexes. Oh, hold on there. Some people are better than others. So let's visual face preference, class ability from statistical learning. How are we trying to teach other animals statistics, to be fair. Like, I've never looked at my dog and was like, hey, I'm going to try to teach it statistics today. I've never even attempted that. So I don't even know if he could. You know, I saw a dog on Instagram or something a couple like years ago do like some, I think it was like addition, maybe some multiplication. I don't know if dogs can do calculus or, you know, or statistics. I haven't tried it. Pigeons can do math. Exactly. Rats also love being tickled and have humor. I don't know what rat humor is. I don't know what that is, but it might be funny. I don't know if we gave it a chance yet. Um, you read okay. You read Dolphin Fact. Okay. Uh, yeah, these things are crazy here. Uh, I'm just trying to think. Theory of mind, cultural. Okay, animals do have cultural norms, though. Like, we do know that, right? I feel like we know that certain animals have like cultural things about them that they do, that like just their area, like their region of that, like that one species does things, but this one area of these species kind of do this thing individually. I'm sure that happens.
Some behaviors can have both instinctive and learned components. But humans excel not only at learning behaviors, but also at inventing new ones in response to situations that they've never experienced before, taking seemingly unrelated ideas and finding connections between them, what might be called creativity or imagination. But
Animals do this too. I'm sorry, I gotta call this out. Animals do this too.
even this isn't unique to humans. In a study on Japanese macaques on Kashima Island, in which grains of wheat were scattered along the shore, one particular female worked out how to drop handfuls of sand into water so that the grains floated to the surface, making it much easier to gather them than by picking each one off the ground, a behavior that soon spread to other members of the troop. In one study, spotted hyenas demonstrated greater cooperative problem-solving abilities than even chimpanzees, taking less than 2 minutes to deduce that simultaneously pulling 2 separate ropes would reveal a food reward, even teaching the solution to other hyenas that were later introduced to the same experiment. Portia spiders have been shown to use a trial-and-error approach to develop new hunting strategies that are each fine-tuned to counter the behavior of a different species of prey, even in lab experiments that pitted them against artificial prey with behaviors that don't exist in the wild. A few animals even show creative abilities that are possibly on par with those of humans. Many corvids, particularly New Caledonian crows, surpass most primates in their ability to make and use complex tools, and solve puzzles with equivalent proficiency to 8-year-old human children. Elephants also score highly on problem-solving tests, even finding solutions that their human researchers didn't anticipate. They've also demonstrated a grasp of basic arithmetic, achieving similar accuracy to humans in keeping track of the running total of objects added to containers in variable quantities. Similar numerical comprehension has been observed in cetaceans like bottlenose dolphins, who employ creative thinking to invent new hunting techniques, from using sponges as helmets to protect their snouts when foraging on the seabed, to herding shoals of fish by creating curtains of sand and mud to block their path, to using shells as funnels to filter out small prey, to cooperating with teams of fishermen, being one of the only animals capable of some degree of two-way linguistic communication with humans.
That might not be true. I feel like dogs definitely have some type of two-way communication with humans. It's not that I know that, like, when a dog looks at me, what he's saying, but I kind of get the gist of it. It's like, I don't 100% know, but I have an idea of, like, a couple of things you may want to be, you know, may have on your mind right now. You know, and I feel like there's definitely times where I've, like, just had a normal conversation with the dog and they just understood me completely. Like, even if they like partially understood it, they at least got the gist of what I was going through in that moment. You know, if I'm like, yo, relax, calm down a little bit, they were like, you know, I think he told me to calm down. I'm not 100% sure, but let me calm down and see. And then he calms down, and then we're both happy. It's like, yo, that's two-way communication right there. Dog looks at me and it's like, you know, looks back at his dog bowl, and then I'm like, oh, you want food. That's two-way communication right there. He said possibly and one of, okay, which includes dog. Okay.
All of the above animals have also passed the mirror test, one of the most widely used methods for assessing an animal's degree of self-awareness, which involves the animal using a mirror to investigate a mark placed on a part of its body that wouldn't ordinarily be visible to it, indicating that it recognizes its reflection as an image of itself. The only significant difference between the creative behaviors of animals like these and those of humans is the scale at which they're implemented. And keep in mind that all of these species happen to be alive during the present day, and there's no telling how many similarly intelligent species might have evolved over the hundreds of millions of years that multicellular life has existed, suggesting that this level of sapience might not be all that uncommon. Where we choose to draw the line between the behaviors of animals like these and sapience is more or less arbitrary, but to establish a more meaningful distinction than one based on intelligence, we'll coin the term facultative sapience, the ability to create new behaviors and technology to supplement pre-existing survival strategies, while humans are the only known species to have attained what we'll call obligate sapience, being so dependent on creating new behaviors and technologies to modify their environment that they can no longer survive in the wild without them. Based on the fact that it's only evolved one time in the 4 billion years or so that life on Earth has existed, the conditions that favour obligate sapience seem to be quite rare, making it difficult to determine how and why it evolves. Teleological thinking has led to the notion that
there could have been sapient dinosaurs. Guys, the show Dinosaurs could have been real. That could have been a similar situation to how it actually was, ladies and gentlemen. We don't know. As far as we know, Dinosaurs, the TV show from the 90s, was not based off real events. We have no evidence of that ever being the case. But also, we don't know if it wasn't 100%. We can't 100% say that never happened. Because let's say their buildings just weren't as, detailed as ours, or didn't have the same materials, or didn't just last as long. Maybe things just happened. Those layers of rocks look like normal rocks now. Who knows what happened over millions and millions of years of erosion. Maybe not in the way it was in the dinosaurs. That would be too human-like. You know what? They probably didn't have the starter jackets. They probably didn't have, the construction job. That's Whoopi Goldberg's film, was a document, the one with the dinosaur. Okay, so I have seen that Whoopi Goldberg in the dinosaur movie. I think it's like something in Rex or something. I've seen that at least one time. It may have been one of the most ridiculous movies I've ever seen. But yeah, who knows? We don't know what dinosaur life was like. We don't know how communication was. Theodore Rex was the name of that movie. Land Before Time may have also been a real. That possibly was real. I will say that would probably be a more realistic events of what happened in those days. The Land Before Time. I will give you that. Especially with Sapiens, they probably communicated like, hey, we don't see it. We don't know. That we can't say.
Unique characteristics have come about specifically as pre-adaptations for.
I hope YouTube doesn't get mad that the whole time we were paused, it was on this guy's junk. Like, I didn't notice that it was just on his junk the whole time, but it wasn't like a thing I did on purpose. And that's just something YouTube would have to deal with on their side. YouTube, don't fault me. This is all speculative. We don't know if his junk looked like this or not. So let's, that's all I have to say about
Sapience, and that the humanoid design is the ideal form for all sapient life. But so many aspects of human biology are merely incidental holdovers of their primate ancestry. Humans' long arms and extremely flexible shoulder joints ultimately derive from their arboreal forebears adapting to reach between gaps in the foliage and swing through the treetops. Their dexterous grasping hands from the need to securely grab onto branches, their unusually flat faces and forward-angled eyes from the reduction of snout length in early simians as their sense of smell diminished in favor of the acute vision and spatial awareness necessary for maneuvering through the canopy, their lack of a tail from their ancestors evolving the pendulum-like body shape optimal for brachiation, which meant that when Australopithecines later came down from the trees and adopted bipedalism to save energy when travelling over long distances, they had no way of counterbalancing their elevated arms and torso and were forced to assume their unique orthograde posture. And that's not even mentioning the fact that every facet of human anatomy had to be adapted from the ancestral vertebrate body plan, a starting point that an alien Sophont certainly wouldn't share. There's no reason to think that any of these traits would be mandatory for Sapiens to evolve, and in fact, the odds of another Sophont independently...
I always be thinking, like, this form of, like, aliens and our idea of it is so weird that they would just be so humanoid, but then we would just change specific aspects of them to make it look like, oh, well, that's not... Like, I don't know if they would ever look like this, or what reason that they would look like this. Like, the humanoid body shape may be one of the least effective things for other creatures who didn't have the exact same path that we went through. You know, why would you even need to have arms like that if you never came from a species that was, like, in trees and stuff, you know? Like, were there other purposes for it? What if you came from a species that burrowed? Or wouldn't you have, like, almost claw-like freaking nails or something? Like, or, whoa, what's going on there? Or, like, claw-like things, you know? I just feel like there's so many options that you would have. And we always go for the humanoid thing. We even do it with robots. Like, why are robots, or, like, these little robot creature android things that they're trying to make now, all humanoid? Like, do you think human hands are the best hands to do dishes with? Probably not. We do it because we have the human hands. That's the human dinosaur. Like, why would this humanoid dinosaur exist? I don't know why they think it would exist. What does that even mean, the human dinosaur?
Following exactly the same...
Is this like a known thing? Am I the only one who doesn't know about the human dinosaur? That's weird.
...evolutionary pathway are astronomically unlikely, as evidenced by the fact that none of the facultatively sapient species we brought up earlier are even remotely humanoid. So then, what are the necessary prerequisites for obligate sapience? Again, it's very difficult to say anything with certainty based on our limited sample size, and there are counterexamples to every trend we observe, but we can make some generalized predictions. First of all, since, by the definition we're using, sapience involves learned behaviors, a Sophont will need to be capable of learning in the first place, which, at the most basic level, requires the ability to sense the environment and execute a versatile range of behaviors in response. Okay. This means that plants and other sessile organisms are probably out of the running, since their ability to detect and react to stimuli is inherently very limited. But no matter how adept they are at learning, it will unavoidably take an obligate Sophont many years to accumulate the enormous volume of information necessary for a lifestyle that's entirely dependent on technology, which will only be possible for animals with a relatively long lifespan. Lifespan is influenced by many physiological and ecological factors, but the strongest correlate is size, as smaller animals are more vulnerable to predators and other hazards, and so invest in maximizing their fitness in the short term while they still can, rather than gamble on the slim chance they'll survive through multiple breeding seasons, while larger animals can rely on their size for protection, and so can afford to distribute their reproductive efforts over a longer time. We can therefore expect that sapience will be most common in animals of an appreciable, though not necessarily large, body size, probably at least a few kilograms to give them a lifespan lasting multiple years, although octopuses serve as a notable counterexample, having some of the largest brains and most complex behaviors of any invertebrate, despite most species not only being very small, but also semiparous. This is especially surprising because one of the primary mechanisms by which learned behaviors are passed on is by being taught to the next generation, which not only means that obligate Sophonts will necessarily be iteroparous, but also that they'll need a way of transmitting information. In other words, the capacity for culture. Many animals show cultural variation across different regions and populations, including behaviors that don't seem to convey any kind of practical benefit. Some communities of western chimpanzees have been observed throwing rocks at trees so that they accumulate in piles at their base or within hollows in their trunks. And throughout the past few decades, certain pods of orcas have participated in a fad of habitually perching dead salmon on their heads, but the motivations behind both of these behaviors are still unknown. The most common and practical way of transmitting culture.
In my opinion, the dead salmon on the head thing is like, hey, he got that on for real. Like, yo, that's crazy. That I ain't never seen a dead salmon on the head before. That's kind of dope. Let me rock that. That may have been like a thing where like a famous dolphin in the dolphin community did it, and then other dolphins were like, "Oh my gosh, that orca did it! Oh my gosh!" If it was any other orca, I would think that was corny, but it was him, bro. He got that on for real, and then everybody else started doing it, you know, like. But then like the throwing rocks at trees thing. That might be a game. You know, I'm gonna take human bias. I'm gonna with my human bias, I'm gonna say that was probably a game that is very popular in the chimpanzee community. It might not be like a super big game, like, oh man, there's competitions on it. Maybe there are, who knows? But maybe it's just like a well-known game that chimpanzees play, you know, in their free time. You know, let's see who can collect the most rocks, or which tribe is collecting rocks. Maybe it's a form of currency. You know, maybe it's a thing like, hey, I really be having the rocks for real. You know, my area looks better. Look at the rocks, how it's decorated. That's, you know, it's kind of crazy. Orcas attempting to connect the salmon god. You contact the salmon god is hilarious. Bro's got salmon for the Salmon Force Ones. Oh, your dad needs a computer. No, that's fine. Yeah, we're just talking about why salmons would have done, you know, or why orcas would have done this. The Salmon Force Ones is pretty funny. Penguins use rocks as currency. I'm serious. That's insane. You know, hey, we use paper, so it's actually maybe less crazy than what we do. But shout outs to the rich penguins out there who just have a bunch of rocks just collecting. This penguin over here, he sees like a bunch of rocks just laying around. He's like, whoa, brother, I'm rich. I'm coming back here all the time. I'm not going to tell anybody else about this area I found that has a bunch of rocks in it. I'm actually rich now. You guys go, you peasants.
Is through parental care, since parents will have a vested interest in teaching their young all the behaviors they need to survive to adulthood. Animals with an especially complex repertoire of learned behaviors commonly remain under their parents' care for significant portions of their lives. Elephants, chimpanzees, and humans nurture their young for over a decade, and orcas are the only known species whose young remain with their mother for their entire lives. Prolonged periods of parental care, especially biparental care, will be most strongly selected for in altricial species, as the more helpless the young are at birth, the more they'll rely on their parents to protect them and teach them the skills they need to survive. Plus, the more growth occurs after birth, the greater the extent that brain development will be shaped by learned experiences, leading to a more adaptable range of behaviors, which suggests that sapience might be correlated with altriciality. Although elephants and cetaceans are largely precocial, most corvids and primates tend towards altriciality, with humans being exceptionally so, taking over a year to even learn how to walk, and born with brains only a quarter of the size of the adults that take up to 25 years to complete their development. It's been suggested that this extraordinarily long developmental period may have been influenced by the evolution of bipedalism. As human ancestors evolved narrower pelvises for more efficient bipedal locomotion, it became harder for the ever-enlarging head to pass through the birth canal, a trade-off known as the obstetrical dilemma, for which reason childbirth is a more hazardous ordeal in humans than in almost any other animal. This may have been mitigated by giving birth to increasingly premature young before the head became prohibitively large, so that the majority of brain growth occurs after birth. Of course, this doesn't mean that bipedalism is mandatory for extended developmental periods, as a species can arrive at altriciality by many other pathways. Both long lifespans and parental care are associated with K-selection, which we would therefore expect to be the predominant life history strategy among zoophaunts, implying that sapience is correlated with low fecundity and small clutch sizes, which is corroborated by the fact that humans and most facultatively sapient animals on Earth almost always give birth to only one offspring at a time, with twins and other multiple births being very rare. Considering all of this, it seems unlikely that obligate sapience will evolve among the lophostomes, since most species have small body sizes, high fecundity, no parental care instincts, and other traits consistent with R selection. On the other hand, both the Xenopsids and the
I'm not gonna lie, I almost forgot we were still doing this part, and we still had to talk about all the other things about this whole species here. We've already went on for so long already. I'm gonna try to keep the yap as relevant as possible. You guys know me. I'm going to try. But almost hyenas have birth canals. They have it worse than us? Oh, wow. Yeah. It's a lot of stuff happening right here. So I'm going to try to keep the yap as yap free, but I have a feeling there's going to be a lot still.
Ramphidonts tend towards K selection, with parental care being an ancestral trait among both clades and highly altricial young being one of the Ramphidonts' signature characteristics. Along with parental care, a Sophont will benefit from having as many opportunities to learn new behaviors as possible, not just from their parents, but from other members of their species, meaning they're likely to exhibit sociality. Living in large social groups means that knowledge can be shared and quickly spread through a population, who can all cooperate to modify the environment to a much greater extent than any of them could individually. In fact, sociality may not just go hand in hand with sapience, but actually drive its evolution. Living in a group demands a number of cognitive skills, including a memory sufficient to keep track of all the interactions between group members, the behavioral complexity to coordinate group activities, and in some species a theory of mind, the capacity to understand that other individuals have their own perceptions, emotions, and intentions that are different to one's own, and to imagine the world from another's point of view. There's even some experimental evidence linking sociality with brain size. Humans are able to maintain close personal relationships with a maximum of roughly 150 individuals at a time, a limit known as Dunbar.
I don't know. I feel like I can maintain great relationships with, I don't know, maybe like 1,100 people or so at a time. But, that's just me. How many people are subscribed to the channel? Maybe, if you guys continue to subscribe, the number of people that I can have social relationships with also grows with the channel. So keep that in mind when you guys are doing stuff. I appreciate you. He did say an average. So, some have more. You're right. Some have more. And again, the more people who subscribe to me, the more my number goes up. So you can kind of prove how great I am as well. So we're all on the same agreements here. I know I wasn't supposed to yap about irrelevant things, but considering how relevant this was, I feel like this was worth it.
Number, whereas chimpanzees, who have a neocortex about 1/3 the size of humans, have been shown to have an upper limit of about 50 close relationships,
about 50.
Which, along with data from other primates, reveals a correlation between degree of sociality and neocortex size. And this trend isn't only present in great apes. Spotted hyenas show similarities to primates not only in the structure and complexity of their social groups, but also in their competence at cognitive tasks and social learning. And there's evidence that the large brain size in cetaceans also evolved in response to the increasing complexity of their social behaviors. All of this lends support to the social intelligence hypothesis, which posits that living in complex social groups selects for the cognitive functions and behavioral adaptability associated with sapience. Although more recent research has identified some confounding factors that we'll get into later, but nonetheless, sociality is an essential precursor for civilization, and will therefore be mandatory for obligate sapience. Again, both the Ramphidonts and Xenopsids have inherited social tendencies from their ancestors, so suitable candidates for sapience could exist among both clades.
Okay.
Just as on Earth, facultative sapients may evolve in several unrelated groups, but for this video we'll focus on one in particular. By this point, the Dryptognathans will have become a very diverse and successful clade of many hundreds of species, accounting for the majority of carnivorous ramphidonts, although they'll still be mostly precluded from the niches of large predators from competition with the xenopsids. Within the patchwork of forests and steppe in the southern tropics, the Dryptognathans will give rise to one particular clade of small social mesocarnivores. While their habitat will offer them plenty of food...
Hold on. This looks actually incredible. I'm scared, but also impressed. The sky looks absolutely incredible in this. This is absolutely terrifying. This thing is absolutely terrifying. The drawings is absolutely incredible. So yeah,
will also be home to an abundance of predators like ceratodonts and peleropsids. So these Dryptognathans will travel together for protection in fission fusion societies of anywhere from 30 to 100 members. They'll also find a degree of protection in spending most of the daylight hours within the shelter of dense vegetation, and will only venture onto the open plains under the cover of darkness. The large eyes and tapetum lucidum they've retained from the ancestral ramphidonts granting them the necessary low light vision for a nocturnal or crepuscular lifestyle. To help them navigate the intricacies of group interactions, they'll not only evolve larger, more complex brains, but also increasingly elaborate modes of communication. All extant ramphidonts have vibrating membranes within their respiratory tracts, which in these Dryptognathans will evolve specialized bones that serve as sites of attachment for vocal muscles to more precisely modulate their calls, like the hyoid bone in Earth's vertebrates, as well as expandable resonating chambers on the side of the cephalothorax that help to amplify their vocalizations. Many social animals also complement their auditory communication with a variety of visual signals. Hyenas and African wild dogs both display complex systems of body language involving the positioning of the ears and tail and overall body posture, as well as specific stances when approaching an individual of higher rank and special ceremonies to greet returning group members. Like many primates, humans use a plethora of autonomic non-verbal signals that are shared across all cultures, including a huge variety of facial expressions, some of which involve specialized muscles that can't be flexed voluntarily, making them inherently honest signals of emotional state.
Oh wow.
Humans are also the only animals known to shed tears as a response to extreme emotion, as well as one of the few capable of laughter. Human eyes have irises that clearly contrast with their sclerae, making it easy to tell where they're looking and to send subtle signals through eye contact and shifting gaze, an adaptation that also exists to some extent in chimpanzees. All of these cues, along with other aspects of body language, ensure the expression of as much visual information as possible.
I will say this feels a little human bias as well here, because do we know what type of cues other animals know in their body language? Do we know any other species enough to really speculate on their body language and how they're learning what are their signals and their calls? Because I don't know. This is some real humans in general stuff here, but I'm just saying, it just feels like we're really saying we're the ones who have all these range of emotions that we can do and we cry. Very extent. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we kind of know, but I'm just saying, it feels like we may not have communicated with every animal on a level. I don't know if we have the capabilities to fully communicate with animals on a level to tell. We can give them our tests, but our tests are going to be biased, I will say. Project Zero, okay. Some species are easier to determine than others. Yeah. He's just using humans as an example. I get that part. I just want to make sure we take out our human bias with this.
Concerning one's attitude and intentions, suggesting that gauging the thoughts and feelings of others was a crucial aspect of social interactions among early humans, which may also be the case for other sophonts. One common signaling mechanism in many mammals is piloerection, the tensing of muscles in the skin to cause the fur to stand on end, which makes the animal appear larger and more imposing to scare off potential threats, a reflex whose vestigial remnants linger in humans as goosebumps. As most dystrophiognathans have a coat of fur, many species may evolve a similar threat display, which these dryptognathans will augment by evolving longer fur on their cephalothorax and resonating chambers to make the piloerection more apparent, eventually evolving into crests that can be flared out to intimidate rivals and to assert dominance, and adjusting the position and angle of these crests, combined with other subtle aspects of body language, will convey a diverse array of expressions. Since these crests evolve as a means of communication rather than purely as a sexual display, both males and females will sport crests of similar size, shape, and coloration, a feature for which we'll call them astrolophids. But to the astrolophids, smell will be just as important a sense as sight and hearing, as their scavenging habits will demand the ability to detect the stench of carrion over great distances, which will open another avenue of communication.
Smell, taste.
Many species on Earth are equipped with scent glands that produce pheromones and other sociochemicals, many even having different types of scent glands that are each associated with different signals. In social animals, scent is often a key component of group interactions, such as how clans of spotted hyenas each have their own unique scent signature for marking their territory and identifying their members. All osteopods have a set of excretory glands at the base of each of their limbs that filter waste out of the blood. In the astrolophids, the glands on the forelimbs will lose their excretory function and become dedicated scent glands that produce a viscous secretion used to mark territory and communicate health and status. They'll also evolve another pair of scent glands on their upper mandibles that evolved from salivary glands, which will convey more subtle signals relating to mood, familiarity, and sexual availability. As such, scent marking and investigating each other's chemical signals will be primarily accomplished through facial contact, which will therefore be a crucial mode of interaction between group members. A large part of the astrolophid sociality will revolve around their...
Now, it's gonna look like they're kissing from a human's perspective, but again, that's just the human bias in us, making them go smoochies, that's, we gotta do that. Yeah, let's not spam the things in the chat, guys. That's, we don't want to do that.
Mating system. As is standard for amphidonts, ensuring that their exceedingly altricial young survive through their long period of juvenile development, during which they learn all the skills necessary for their independent survival, will require a considerable investment of time and energy from both parents and possibly other members of the social group, which will favor a monogamous mating system and, in some species, cooperative breeding. Within the groves of trees in which they establish their territories, they'll create large communal nest sites where they can collectively care for their vulnerable grubs. Since the females require as much help as possible to raise the young, the most desirable quality that they'll look for in males won't be size, strength, or coloration, but parenting skills, one major element of which will be building and maintaining the nest, which will therefore function as the centerpiece of the male's courtship displays, just as it does in weaver birds, house wrens, and some other bird species. During the breeding season, each male will secure his own patch of the group's territory and construct a nest out of earth, plant matter, and other materials, which the females will use to evaluate the male's worth as a mate, pairing off with the builder of whichever nest they judge to be the best nursery for their young.
I feel like this could start something crazy here when, the competition over time especially starts getting crazier. That's just at that point, hundreds of years from now, thousands of years from now, they probably will be on their way to all right, let's actually construct a full building here. We need to use tools. I might need to get a crew together to make sure my place looks really nice, which means I might have to have an incentive for them to, want to do this for me. So now I have to have maybe invent a form of currency at some point, just to make sure that my things look better so I can get this. And it's just, this feels like this could be the start of something really crazy. Now you're starting to get it. Okay. All right. I'm starting to get on the right path here. I'm happy about that.
In time, this behavior will be exaggerated by sexual selection, with the nests becoming more and more intricate and ornate,
Yeah.
involving similar architectural complexity and decoration to that used by male bowerbirds in the construction of their bowers. This will select for greater inquisitiveness and ingenuity to invent new nest-building techniques, which, along with the demands of sociality, will impel them to evolve larger and more adaptable brains. However, while sociality has undeniably played a part in the evolution of sapience, some studies have called its role as the primary driver of higher cognition into question, having identified other factors that correlate with brain size just as closely, the most notable being diet and resource availability. Maintaining a large brain requires a huge amount of energy, so sophonts will benefit from eating calorie-dense foods like meat and fruit, which may be why the massive enlargement of the brain in human evolution coincided with an increased preponderance of meat in their diet. Although then again, elephants have reached their level of facultative sapience despite predominantly feeding on nutrient-poor foods like grass and leaves. On a similar note, it's often speculated that sapience is most likely to occur among predators, since predation, especially pack hunting, generally involves more complex behaviors than other modes of feeding, like judging the right moment to ambush and coordinating hunting strategies between packmates.
Okay.
However, for one thing, complex behaviors can arise from other aspects of life than just feeding behaviors, like sentinel behavior and other means of predator avoidance. But more importantly, remember that sapience isn't just a matter of behavioral complexity, but of the capacity to learn and invent new behaviors. And as we touched on earlier, learned behaviors don't come about through evolutionary specialization like innate behaviors do, but instead from a need for behavioral flexibility to cope with variable conditions, which would suggest that sapience is correlated with generalist tendencies, but not so generalist that the species can survive without inventing new behaviors, suggesting a happy medium along the spectrum of specialization at which sapience will be most strongly favored. As is typical for dryptognathans, the australophids will be mesocarnivores, most species primarily feeding on carrion, malacoforms, and other small prey, occasionally supplemented with seeds and brachyphyte roots, all of which will be processed by the unique hyperarticulated mouthparts common to all dystrophiognathans. But procuring and handling this variety of food will not only involve adaptations to their mouthparts, but also to their forelimbs. Quite possibly the most overstated idea in the discussion of sapience is that all sophonts must inevitably evolve human-like hands to manipulate the environment. But yet again, this line of thinking is woefully teleological. First of all, the ability to handle objects is not at all indicative of sapience, being extremely widespread among all sorts of animals, including species that couldn't be called sapient even by the most generous definition. The evolution of the hand in human ancestors wasn't the fundamental adaptation that made sapience possible, but occurred long before they reached anything even resembling sapience to help them climb trees, and it was only much later that the hands were adapted for tool use. Conversely, lacking manipulatory appendages in no way prevents or inhibits sapience. Dolphins have achieved facultative sapience despite not having any means of manipulation other than their mouths. In short, the ability to grab things has nothing inherently to do with higher cognition. But, all that being said, obligate sapience, by definition, involves a species reshaping its habitat into an artificial environment that it can't survive outside of, which will only be possible if it has some way of altering its environment in the first place. However, there's no reason to think that a sophont would need a hand to be effective in manipulation. An elephant's trunk is just as versatile, deft enough to pluck a single blade of grass, letting them grip and utilize a variety of...
A single blade of grass? Elephants over here getting, like, singular blades of grass with their trunk? Not gonna lie, I didn't expect that one. I was expecting, like, bunches of grass. Like, I didn't know if they could do singular strips. That's very precise, because you're doing that with your trunk, which means the distance is, like, insane. Like, you know, you ever try to grab something with your hand and you miss? Like, we all been there before. You try to grab the straw, drink the straw, you're not fully paying attention, you don't even get it. It's just like, come on, bro. You know, it's just like a singular grain of rice. What? And singular grains of rice? Let me see an elephant grab a singular grain of rice, bro. I'm looking out at that elephant like, bro, what's going on here? You guys know more than we think you know. I'm on to you, elephant. I see you pick up a singular grain of rice again. I'm I know they're really smart, but at that point I'm like, bro, I'm on to you. You guys know a better way of living than us humans, and you're just not telling us about it, or you just saying, hey, we're about to do our thing and I don't care what you do. Either way, we should be looking out more for what you guys are doing, and pay a little bit more attention to that. Elephants are crazy and they are cool. I believe
Tools,
that.
and with the aid of the tusks, lift objects as large as tree trunks, making them extremely effective ecosystem engineers. One of the Ramphdont's signature traits is the set of digits on their forelimbs, which first evolved in their burrowing Eurychirid ancestors as a way of broadening the foot to make it better able to rip into and scoop away soil, much like the digging claws of mole crickets on Earth. But many Ramphrodont clades of the new era have abandoned
This is a new one for me.
claws of
I've never seen this before. A mole cricket. That is an interesting looking creature. I bet it's living its best life. I bet this creature has a really good life.
mole crickets on Earth. But many Ramphrodont clades of the new era have abandoned fossoriality, freeing them to adapt their digits for different purposes. Being predators, the Astrolophids' forelimbs will have adapted for raptoriality, able to fold up against the cephalothorax and dart forward to seize prey, with an enlarged middle digit for grabbing their target and pulling it towards the mouthparts. To permit a more versatile range of manipulatory tasks, this digit will be equipped with a fleshy, sensitive pad to grip against a rounded protuberance at its base, making it suitable for carrying food, nest material, and other objects. Their mouthparts will also aid in manipulation, as the Dystrophiognathon's jaw structure lets the mandibles act as a laterally opposed pair of pincers, and the proximity of the arms and the mouth will allow them to be used together to handle especially large objects, the muscles in the cephalothorax letting them lift heavier loads than the arms could hold alone. The other digits will specialize to assist in feeding. To reach into tight crevices, the inner digit will become slender and hyperextended, tipped with a hooked claw for extracting malacoforms, apodomorphs, and small seeds, while the outer digit will maintain a relatively large, robust claw, used for digging, fending off rivals, and other tasks that might damage the other claws. Another manipulatory task that's very important among many social species is grooming, which not only helps keep their fur clean of dirt, debris, and parasites, but also encourages the formation and maintaining of social bonds. Many mammals, like lemurs, colugos, and tree shrews, have independently evolved tooth combs as an adaptation for grooming, and many primates have a specialized grooming digit called a toilet claw. In the Astrolophids, the claw tipping the middle digit will bear tooth-like serrations that can press against the upper surface of the tactile pad, so that fur can be gripped between them and combed through, much like the split grooming claws on the hind feet of beavers. This can also double as a feeding tool, combing through the gametangial filaments of zygophytes to strain out morsels of food. With all of these adaptations, the Astrolophids will achieve ample success, spreading throughout much of the tropics and radiating into dozens of different...
Shoutouts to this artist. I love this photo. It just looked like, yo, we're coming up here. This, like, they're not looking at me. They're not worried about us. We're at a perspective where we're not being acknowledged by the creature, which I love that perspective that we're in right now. Like, we're on the ground and we're looking up. They're just like walking past us or over us. But it still gives them that, not only that intimidation factor, but that like coolness to it, if you know what I mean. It's just like, I love
species. Being K-selecting, social, and having a moderately generalist but calorie-rich diet, the Astrolophids will meet all of the essential prerequisites for sapience. But yet again, we have to be wary of teleology here. Just because a species fills these requirements doesn't mean that it's somehow destined to reach sapience. After all, there are plenty of species on Earth that tick all of these boxes, and yet only a small handful of them even come close to sapience. Like any other trait, sapience will only evolve if it provides a species with an immediate survival advantage, which, based on what we see on Earth, doesn't seem to occur very often. But there is one major factor that will act as the catalyst for obligate sapience. While physical adaptations and innate behaviors can reach extraordinary degrees of complexity and specialization, they're inherently limited by the speed of evolutionary change, and as such will only be practical if conditions remain stable over long periods. But the more variable and unpredictable a habitat becomes, the more difficult it will be to specialize for, and the greater benefit there'll be in being able to learn and invent new behaviors. Therefore, once all the preceding prerequisites are in place, the final factor required to push a species past the threshold of obligate sapience is an environmental change too rapid to evolve any physiological adaptations or innate behaviors to cope with, but not so rapid that it can't survive and is driven to extinction. A window of time just long enough to invest in a more flexible imagination to let them invent novel solutions to whatever challenges their changing habitat presents. Early hominins had no physical adaptations to deal with the climate fluctuations of the Pleistocene, nor any claws, fangs, or other natural weapons for hunting the megafauna they preyed upon, and so they were forced to compensate by developing tools, clothing, shelters, and other technology. Considering this, it would seem that obligate sapience, far from being the pinnacle of evolutionary advancement, is actually something of a last resort, an extremely circumstantial contingency by which a species can carve out a niche for itself in an environment it has no adaptations for surviving in. This being the case, for the australophids to make the transition to obligate sapience, they'll need to endure a suitably abrupt yet survivable change in conditions. Though the planet will have cooled considerably since the mass extinction, and will continue to cool as the supercontinent drifts further southward, the new era will still be in the midst of a hothouse period, with most of the supercontinent experiencing a perpetually warm and tropical climate, with only the extreme south ever experiencing significant seasonality and climatic variation. Such benign conditions will provide most species with plenty of opportunity to specialize for their habitat, so most australophids won't have much need for sapient behaviors beyond those necessary for their social interactions.
Okay.
But as the southern mountain range continues to rise, the tectonic activity that fuels their growth.
I wasn't expecting that. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't expect that to be a volcano just there.
Will eventually trigger a series of intermittent eruption events, which, although not large-scale enough to cause another mass extinction, will still lead to several million years of climatic instability, involving sudden spurts of global cooling as the volcanic emissions increase the planet's albedo. The effects of this climate shift will be most apparent in the far south, which, soon after the eruptions begin, will rapidly become colder and more arid, causing the forests to give way to scrublands and cold deserts, a change too sudden for most species to adapt to, driving many of the inhabitants of the southern regions to extinction. But one particular species of australophid will be just generalist enough to eke out a living as their habitat transforms around them, but not so generalist that they can immediately find a new niche following the transition. With conditions changing so rapidly, they'll only have time to undergo a minimal degree of adaptation, but the one trait that will provide a reliable advantage will be the cognitive capacity to create new survival strategies on the fly, driving them further and further towards obligate sapience, culminating in the emergence of a new genus that we'll call Paleotecton. What few physical adaptations and innate behaviors Paleotecton manages to evolve will mainly serve to help them survive in a colder and more desolate habitat. With the onset of the eruptions, the highlands along the western edge of the mountains where Paleotecton first evolves will be gripped by a cold, semi-arid climate, with huge temperature variation both between day and night and seasonally, the relatively mild summers giving way to long, dry winters with temperatures hovering around freezing. An environment roughly analogous to the Kazakh steppe or the Wyoming basin on Earth.
Okay.
To help them survive through the colder parts of the year, the paleotecs will become larger and stockier, with a thicker coat of fur to let them conserve a greater amount of body heat. But adapting to this harsh landscape will also demand changes to their feeding and social behaviors. During the summers, this land will be home to big game like teleopsids, anaxathias, and pachycolaphorans, most of which will migrate north with the approach of winter, when the cryptophytes undergo abscission and the landscape withers into a parched desert. For the paleotects, the most readily available food sources during the winters will be those below the barren soil, including prey like Eryctochirids, apodomorphs, and estivating xerostricans, as well as tylophyte and cryptophyte bulbs, whose drought-adapted tubers will also serve as a vital source of water. Although malacoforms will still be one of their staple foods, they won't be quite as abundant here as they would be in more fertile areas, so the largest component of the Paleotech's diet will be meat that they obtain through scavenging and pack hunting. The only places that will offer food in any abundance will be the scarce rivers and watering holes that support colonies of drought-resistant vegetation. Such concentrated patches of resources will be ideal places for the Paleotechs to form their territories, but the surrounding stretches of barren wastelands will make dispersal a dangerous prospect, which will have major implications for their social dynamics. As covered in Part 12, a high cost of dispersal, along with monogamy and altricial young, are the main factors that select for helpers at the nest and, in extreme cases, reproductive suppression and eusociality. All of these pressures shaped the evolution of the ancestral ramphidonts, and although many ramphidont clades in the new era will have reverted to more typical breeding systems, most species will still retain altriciality, monogamy, and a predilection for cooperative breeding, which will predispose them to helpers at the nest and subsequent mating behaviours in environments where the success rate of dispersal attempts is sufficiently low. While the Paleotechs are very unlikely to become eusocial in the strictest sense, since the extremely high reproductive rates necessary for eusociality go against the K-selecting tendencies associated with Sapience, their hazardous habitat will still discourage offspring from attempting to disperse
hazardous habitat? Kind of a bar.
And reproduce, so they'll instead remain at their home nest to help their parents raise their next clutch of young, resulting in tight-knit family groups or clans where reproduction is monopolized by only a small handful of group members. The average clan will be led by a dominant female or matriarch, along with 1 to 4 other breeding females, all of whom will be closely related and each form an exclusive lifelong pair bond with a single male. Each breeding pair will produce a separate matriline,
oh wow,
consisting of multiple generations of their offspring that serve as helpers who provide care to their younger siblings, the whole clan containing anywhere from a dozen to over 100 members, varying with the seasons and with local resource availability. A female's reproductive status will be based on a dominance hierarchy that operates both within and between matrilines, with the matriarch being the highest ranking female of the whole clan.
Oh wow.
When a female dies, all the females beneath her on the hierarchy will move up in dominance to fill the gap, the death of a breeding female resulting in the most dominant helper being promoted to breeding status to begin her own matriline. This being the case, while the helpers will achieve inclusive fitness from ensuring the survival and reproduction of their relatives, the only way for them to gain direct fitness will be to bide their time until their turn comes to be granted breeding status, a behaviour in cooperative breeding species that's sometimes called queuing. Occasionally, an impatient helper might try to cheat the system by seeking their own mating opportunities, so the matriarch will need to employ reproductive suppression to keep the helpers in line,
I've heard about this,
attacking or evicting those who attempt to reproduce before their turn comes. Their breeding will also be strongly influenced by the seasonality of their habitat. Whereas humans have monthly menstrual cycles and can breed throughout the year, the Paleotechs will undergo polyestrous cycles in which their fertility fluctuates with the seasons, peaking at the end of the summer so that gestation can occur over the winter months and the grubs can be born in the spring when food becomes relatively abundant again.
You know what? This makes
The
sense.
mating season will also be the time at which the breeders are most aggressive towards the helpers to discourage.
Can you guys imagine if humans did that, where like you could only have children like around the August, so then they can all be born around spring, and then like you just had to be pregnant like if you were to get pregnant, it would only be in the wintertime. Like no more getting pregnant in January or getting pregnant in the summer. No, you only are pregnant in the wintertime. Would people be happier with that? I don't know. I'm not a woman. But, let's ask some women. If we have any women in the chat, just throw it out there. Would you be happier if you could only get pregnant in the fall or towards the end of the summer so you dealt with the majority of your pregnancy during the winter? Ladies, let me know down below.
Them from mating as much as possible. In another big difference to humans, Paleotech females will remain fertile throughout their whole lives, while humans are very unusual for experiencing menopause, whereby females undergo a sharp decline in fertility long before the end of their lifespan, which, considering this only serves to limit their direct fitness, would seem to be inherently maladaptive. One commonly held explanation for this is the grandmother hypothesis, which postulates that, in a multi-generational social structure, there comes a point in a female's life at which she gains greater fitness from helping to raise her grandchildren than from continuing her own reproduction. However, even if this is the case, it only seems to hold under a very narrow range of circumstances, as menopause is only known to consistently occur in 4 other species outside of humans, all of which happen to be cetaceans. Like the vast majority of animal species, paleotect females will undergo no such reduction of fertility with age, and in fact, since dominance within the clan is largely based on age, older females will actually have greater reproductive status, with the matriarch typically being the oldest clan member and producing the most populous matriline. Once a female attains breeding status, she'll produce a new clutch of 1 to 2 grubs every few years for the remainder of her 30-year lifespan. But for the males, breeding will be a totally different story. Males won't exhibit the same queuing behavior as the females, as this would inevitably result in inbreeding. So instead, males will have 2 possible pathways to direct fitness. One will be the protandry they retain from the ancestral ramphidonts, by which males have the possibility of becoming female at some point after they reach maturity.
Interesting.
While on average males will be smaller than females, those of sufficient size and aggressiveness to challenge their female nestmates will undergo hormonal changes that cause them to become female, thus inserting them into the female dominance hierarchy and putting them in line to inherit breeding status. Alternatively, however dangerous it might be, a male can achieve reproductive success by dispersing from the safety of his home territory to seek mates elsewhere. In Part 12, we mentioned how in many social species, dispersal rates are higher for one sex than they are for the other, with monogamous species like most birds typically showing female bias dispersal, while in mammals, which are predominantly polygynous, the dispersing sex is almost always the males, with humans and some other primates forming a peculiar exception. Cooperative breeding, on the other hand, is defined by low dispersal rates for both sexes, often without any significant bias towards one or the other. But on the rare occasions when males and females do disperse, they may have different motivations for doing so. Females will typically prefer to remain within their home clan in the hopes of one day inheriting breeding status, but the fierce competition for dominance may force some of the lower-ranking females to abandon any hope of achieving direct fitness within their natal territory, and to disperse in hopes of having better luck elsewhere. In particular, the matriarch will very aggressively enforce her position as head of the clan, and any dissent towards her dominance is likely to be punished with eviction. On the other hand, since the males won't be able to find mating opportunities within their home clan, dispersal will offer much greater benefits for them. But in sequentially hermaphroditic species, the sex ratio tends to be skewed in favor of the initial sex, which, in the case of protandrous clades like the paleotects and most other ramphidonts, means the majority of young will be born male. Fewer females in the population means that males will be less likely to find a mate if they disperse, so they'll only do so after conducting exploratory forays to assess the availability of nearby mating opportunities, either in the form of evicted females traveling through the Badlands or a neighboring clan in which a breeding male has recently died, leaving the bereaved female available for a new mate. Although the sperm storage mechanisms they retain from their ancestors will allow a female to continue to produce new young after her mate's death until a new and sufficiently fit male presents himself. In the absence of any available females, protandry will once again act as a crucial contingency, allowing some males to become female and choose a mate from among the other dispersing males, after which both will seek out a suitable patch of territory to establish a new clan. Importantly, this social system will have a largely instinctive basis, an extrapolation of the innate behaviors of their astrolophid ancestors, but the adaptation that will be most strongly selected for and constitute the most dramatic change from their ancestors will be a complex enough brain to support an ever-growing range of learned behaviors. Historically, brain size has been regarded as the primary predictor of intelligence, with one of the most commonly used metrics being encephalization quotient, which compares a species' brain size to that of a related species of similar body mass. And while this does serve as a rough indicator of overall intelligence, It doesn't take into account the brain's structure and organization, which contributes to cognition just as much as its size.
True.
For instance, the density at which neurons are packed together can belie greater intelligence than what would be expected based on brain size alone. Corvids and parrots owe much of their impressive intelligence to a neuronal density almost double that of primates with similarly sized brains. But even when factoring in neuronal density, some animals are capable of more intelligent behaviors than what their neuron count would suggest. Portia spiders can plan and execute variable hunting strategies despite having a brain only 500,000 neurons large, which is minuscule in comparison to the many billions of neurons that sapient species typically have, suggesting that intelligence can result from other neurological factors. As a further complication, not all animals concentrate the bulk of their central nervous system in a single brain. In many phyla, the function of the brain is filled by multiple nerve clusters or ganglia, which in animals like octopuses means that the different regions of the body can essentially think independently of each other. But regardless of how it's organized, a complex nervous system comes with a hefty energetic cost. Humans expend about 1/5 of their total calorie intake just in maintaining the brain, which once again highlights the importance of energy-rich foods in a Sophon's diet, but fueling such a power-hungry organ limits the amount of energy available for other body systems, which might explain the trend in human evolution towards smaller guts, an idea termed the expensive tissue hypothesis, as well as the concurrent reduction in overall muscle density. But as alluded to earlier, sapience may demand not only the sacrifice of physical traits, but also of cognitive traits that aren't directly applicable to sapience. Chimpanzees are not only about 30% stronger than humans, but also have a significantly better short-term memory, which, according to the cognitive trade-off hypothesis, may be due to humans undergoing a reduction in working memory so that as much of the brain as possible could be dedicated towards language, sociality, and other aspects of sapience. In light of this, it may be that one reason why sapience is so rare is that, under the vast majority of ecological circumstances, sapience is actually a detriment, the highly demanding brains and cognitive traits necessary for sapience simply not being worth compromising other aspects of physiology. However, once the right selective pressures are in place, brain complexity can apparently increase very quickly. Within only the last 2 million years, the human brain has tripled in size, the regions undergoing the greatest enlargement being those involved in social interaction, language, and problem solving. Although it's worth noting that for reasons that are still being researched, the last few tens of thousands of years have seen human brain size decrease at an even faster rate, seemingly without any cognitive decline.
It's these dang phones, bro. They keep trying to tell us. They're making us dumber. I know we're going to be like, wait, those have only been like they are for decades. They haven't been out there for that long. But it's happening at a faster and faster pace. This is probably like 2000 right here. This is probably like year 2000. And then bam, this downfall here is like 2012. It's like we're one of those things where it's like 2020 and then bam, right down the drain. That's why I wouldn't go into a room. I forget the remote is, and I spend an hour looking for it only to realize it's in my hand. That's hilarious, and stuff like this does happen. Vegeta, what's going on? Wait, is that Vegeta? Okay, Gogeta. Yeah, okay. You know what? In my head, I was like, wait, what if that's vegetable or vegetarian? But then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with my gut here. This has got to be a Dragon Ball reference. I get it now. Thank you.
Yet again indicating that brain size isn't the only variable involved in complex cognition. Like vertebrates, polypods have a high degree of cephalization, with a centralized brain within the cephalothorax that tapers into a pair of lateral nerve cords. In Paleotecton, the regions responsible for the cognitive traits necessary for sapience will become more highly developed, the skull and cephalothorax expanding to accommodate them. One of the cognitive skills most likely to be favored is pattern recognition, which is an essential component of the problem-solving capabilities that obligate sapience requires. The human brain has evolved to reward pattern-seeking behaviors by releasing dopamine in response to finding connections among seemingly unrelated or random data points. and facultatively sapient animals also seem to experience a similar pleasure response from solving puzzles. Human pattern recognition even operates on a subconscious level, their natural urge to follow the patterns in rhythm and melody underlying their enjoyment of music, and identifying links between different conceptual domains as a key element of humor. In fact, humans are so hardwired to look for patterns that they often find them where none exist. One common manifestation of this is pareidolia, the tendency to find images and sounds in random stimuli. This is especially true when it comes to faces, since humans communicate so much information through facial expressions that they were selected to discern them even when they have no meaning or intent behind them. Having a similar degree of sociality to humans, the paleotechs will be keenly perceptive of visual patterns that resemble the crests they use for social signaling, having their own equivalent of facial recognition based around the crests, eyes, and antennae. But humans' knack for finding non-existent patterns and interpreting meaning where there isn't any also makes them quick to jump to conclusions based on whatever they can piece together from available information, often resorting to magical thinking to fill in the gaps in their knowledge, leading them to conceive of superstitions and religions to explain the aspects of the world they can't immediately understand. Another cognitive ability closely tied to this is symbolism, the ability to assign an arbitrary meaning to an object, image, or action so that it represents something else, which is crucial for imagining and communicating ideas independently of present circumstances. Using symbolic behavior, humans are able to convey and understand that a stick figure represents a person, that an arrow indicates direction, and that a thumbs up is a sign of positivity and approval. This ability to derive meaning from abstraction is the foundational principle behind the concept of art, and allows humans to attach significance to cultural customs like stories, currency, fashion, and ceremonial burial. Both pattern recognition skills and symbolic behaviors are key components of the creative thinking that defines sapience, and so are likely to be strongly selected for in all obligate sophonts. But the specific ways in which these cognitive abilities manifest may vary considerably, so that a sophont's appreciation of art, music, and humor, if they even have a recognizable concept of such things, will be based on entirely different criteria to humans. In fact, in the case of the paleotechs, their comprehension of these concepts may originate from an entirely different instinctual starting point to humans, thanks to one particular quirk of their evolution. Even though all the clan's grubs will be raised together in a communal nursery, the male paleotechs will still retain the instincts for the courtship rituals of their ancestors. But rather than building a nest to attract a female, the male will provide her with a sample of his architectural prowess by molding the ground of his display patch into an intricate arrangement of shapes and decorative objects, somewhat like the complex circular patterns created by male white-spotted pufferfish during their courtship rituals.
Oh, wow.
As is often the case with sexually selected traits, these structures won't have any kind of practical function, and the female's appraisal of these displays will be based on a purely subconscious preference for certain aspects of shape and design that would seem unremarkable or even unidentifiable to humans. Over time, the instincts that underpin their ability to create and assess these designs will be amplified by sexual selection, improving their capacity for pattern recognition and symbolic behavior, which will not only give them a much more intuitive grasp of geometric relationships and structural engineering than humans, but will also serve as the root of an aesthetic sense for spatial and angular relationships comparable to humans' appreciation of art and music. When it comes to creating the actual nest, unlike most other astrolophid species, in which males make their own nests individually, in the paleotechs, all the males of the clan will work together to turn
Guys,
their territory.
I said this, and they're doing this. They're doing the thing that I said would happen, and now they're doing the thing, and I'm like, I don't even know how to handle this right now. First of all, incredible. I love that this was actually animated. Burpopo, shout outs to you once again. You always come out with these great animations. This is incredible. Tool use. Most like all these guys working together, like the organization of this, the complexity is incredible. They look pretty cool. Burpopo is the goat. I honestly believe he might actually be one of the goats. There are some arts that I do appreciate, and I'm like, maybe it connects with me personally a little bit more. But the visual aspects of this, as well as the fact that it's animated, is like very much like on the level. Uh, yeah, this is like peak animation right here. But bro, when I'm telling you these animals, like these creatures, this is what I thought when I first saw, and this is like they're actually doing it, but it looks cooler than what I even imagined them. This is actually cooler than what I imagined because I didn't imagine them using pulleys and ropes and stuff right now. That wasn't in my mind at first, but now it's like, whoa, hold on now, real tools here, real like construction work going on right here. These guys might come out wearing like construction helmets soon. You know, give them a few thousand years, they're gonna have some type of protective shell around their head when they're doing this type of work because they know it's inherently dangerous, and they're going to understand that because they have the comprehension to understand the work that they're doing. Even though it's beautiful and it's expressive of oneself, it is still dangerous. Leave That's what they're saying. That's hilarious. Oh, heave. I don't know why I saw that as a L. Heave, ladies and gentlemen. Heave, gentlemen. We have to build this for him. Guys, Billy is really trying to get that chick over there, okay? We want to make sure he can really get, he's paying us in rocks, okay? We're gonna make some good stuff here. Also, he's going to give us some ideas. We're going to help do this again for Charles next week. But guys, we're really trying to get Billy laid this week. We got to make sure that we're getting all this stuff right, okay? We need a pulley over here. We need one that goes right down here to the ground so we can lift this. We got a tarp going up here. Guys, trust me, this is going to look super cool. Billy's definitely going to get laid this weekend. Heave, ladies and gentlemen. Heave, gentlemen. Heave. And that's the conversation that they're most likely having while pulling the ropes. This girl's really hard to get, and we're trying. This girl's really hard to get, guys. We're trying to do it the best we can. Like, she's so bad. I'm trying to think what the sexiest aspect of these for these creatures would be. Guys, her eyes, they're incredible, okay? You've never seen eyes like hers, guys. Trust me. So I want to make sure there's a big eye on this thing so we can like really accentuate her beauty. Maybe compare it. Once I see this thing starting to compare something to the moon, your eyes are like, oh my gosh, the sun, the moon in your eyes. Oh my gosh, what a surprise.
Into one communal den or fortress. The construction of these fortresses will stem from the same instincts as those of their mating.
A fortress, you say? Okay.
Displays. And architect of these fortresses will one communal den or fortress.
Communal den.
The construction of these fortresses will stem from the same instincts as those of their mating displays, and architectural styles and techniques will vary wildly between different clans, incorporating whatever materials are available within their territory. From walls sculpted from rocks and soil, to palisades and fences formed from the trimmed and interwoven leaves and branches of local plant colonies, to roofs made from layers of animal hide supported by frameworks of sticks and bones. A male's contribution to the construction and maintenance of the fortress will be one of the main determinants of his status within the clan, and so each male will seek to set himself apart from the others by adding some unique personal flair to his handiwork, incorporating curious or eye-catching objects he collects like shiny stones, shells, bones, and vibrant plant structures.
I love that. One of them's just going to be walking past something one day and be like, ooh, yo, what is that on the ground? Hold on now. This is actually pretty cool. Let me add that on there. Yo, guess who added this? Yo, Ryan, he added that? Oh my gosh, bro. You want to get like a promotion? I think you deserve a promotion at that point. Like, whoa. Yeah, he really added something cool to this. We're going to give him a promotion. What's going to happen is one of these creatures are going to see something really shiny one day, and realize that, wait, if I dig deeper, I think there's shinier objects down there. And then they're going to realize that, boom, digging is how you get the shiniest objects. Maybe these shiny objects should be quote unquote worth more because of the effort it takes to get one of these things. And now you're going to have mining, and then you're going to have the diamond trade all within this. And maybe the diamond trade will be just as BS as it is in our life, because I don't know. Uh, it's just one of those things. Like, I'm really starting to get. I'm glad I'm starting to get it, because you know what? It's just once they start making the art market and it really just be like a scam. That's when I know these things are just like us for real, and we're on the same. Like, this is literally what we're doing. They're just living our lives, but in a different form. And you know what? They're probably still going to be living it better, because I hope they have free healthcare. At the end of the day, if they can evolve and still have free healthcare, I will say that these guys are smarter than us.
This will select for males who not only have a keen grasp of architectural and technological principles, but also the ability to find new uses for objects in their environment, which will feed into the evolution of their sapience. The capacity for symbolism is also a fundamental precondition for the development of language, which requires the association of meanings with arbitrary...
Wait, is this how we got both of these characters? Like, is this where R comes from? Or like, probably with English, this is probably the closest, but I don't know. Is this where like that comes from in like Japanese or like Chinese characters? Who knows?
Sequences of
the Chinese character one, people probably do know that one. That one probably is like 100%. I don't know about this one for sure, but this one, here to here, looks right to me. Here to here to here, I think this is where I'm a little confused from. This is very complicated, and then this one's very much like, okay, I can see people being like, okay, I mess with this one. This one's like, all right, this is modern day complicated. This one's like, yo, I just know how to draw and I'm flexing. This really feels like I'm the one in the village who knows how to draw things, and I'm just really just like flexing on you guys, because you don't know how to draw like me. I'm gonna draw a whole head. Some people still can't draw this to this day. Thousands of years later, people can't draw this. Nature evolving, or nature evolution of language and writing. Yeah, that you know what? This makes a lot of sense. This one here is just where I'm a little confused.
Sounds and images. While all social species employ some form of communication, only a few exhibit anything comparable to human language in having underlying grammar and an ability to express an effectively infinite range of concepts. Honeybees use what's called a waggle dance to communicate the distance and direction of flowers. Prairie dog alarm calls convey detailed visual descriptions of approaching threats, including their size, speed, species, color, and other specific details of their appearance. And dolphins coordinate group activities with a highly complex series of whistles, each member of the pod using a unique signature whistle that serves to identify them in the same way as a name. And they can also be taught to understand gestural languages devised by...
They have names in dolphin communities? Like, I got a signature whistle? This is my sound? Because, I mean, what are names but your unique sound, if you really think about it? My name is Devon. I have the unique sound. Mr. Rucker. Those are just sounds that are coming out of my mouth that you just so happen to understand, because you've also been taught the same sounds. Dolphins are really cool. Like, whales, too. They all have individual whales. Oh, my gosh, that's cool. I love that. I love knowing that dolphins have individual names. Like, I don't know what their name is, because my voice probably can't vocalize it properly. Like, if I try to say the dolphin's name, it'll look at me like, ew, I hate the way you pronounce my name just now. Don't ever do that again. That's what they would be looking at me like when you try to speak Spanish to somebody, but you don't fully understand Spanish. So you just sound like you're one of those people who are like being like, you're just being like an a-hole, but you're really trying to like genuinely learn the language. And they're like, I see what you're doing. I'm not like a huge fan of it, but I will still work with you. This is how you're supposed to pronounce it. That's how it probably feels for the dolphin, where they're just like, ugh, this guy. Ravens have specific names. That's hilarious. All these animals have names and vocals, like recognition for within each other. But then if we tried to do it, we just seem ridiculous. Like even worse than that scenario I threw in earlier.
Human researchers. When and how language first developed in human ancestors, or even whether it emerged only once or multiple times, is still unknown. But in any case, the neurological underpinning that makes language possible has clearly been strongly selected for over the course of human evolution, as evidenced by the fact that the temporal lobe, which houses the centers of language processing, has undergone a greater degree of expansion in the last few million years than almost any other part of the brain. This isn't too surprising, considering that language massively increases the volume of information that can be expressed in social interactions, hugely facilitating the sharing and passing down of knowledge essential for sapience, and has therefore become one of the most critical elements that makes human society possible. The Paleotext languages will develop from the simpler avenues of communication used by their ancestors, the vocalizations that have been a fundamental means of communication throughout the Australopiths' history, serving as the basis for spoken language, much of which will be informed by the anatomy of their vocal and hearing organs. Human ears can typically pick up sounds between about 20 to 20,000 Hz, but are especially sensitive to sounds within about 2 to 5,000 Hz, the band of frequencies at which speech usually occurs. And there's even some evidence that hominin hearing evolved to become more sensitive to these frequencies alongside the development of language. But the Paleotext vocalizations will primarily occur at higher frequencies, which will also likely be the range to which their hearing is most attuned, meaning they wouldn't be able to hear the differences between many of the sounds used in human languages. To the Paleotexts, human speech would sound like an indiscernible garbled mess, nor would humans be able to distinguish the key distinctions in Paleotext vocalizations, and the two species could never understand one another's speech without the aid of specialized instruments. But the Paleotext spoken languages will be complemented by olfactory signals communicated in a complex alphabet of sociochemicals, and many cultures will also use sign languages involving movements of the forelimbs, antennae, and crests. While language and symbolic behavior will help them envision and communicate new ideas, tool use will be a crucial means of executing those ideas and bringing them into tangible reality. Yet again, tool use isn't at all exclusive to sophonts, but is seen across a huge range of clades, most often involving using a natural object to assist in a particular task, such as how otters and Egyptian vultures use rocks to break open food items. But a handful of species, most notably corvids and great apes, are able to modify objects to make them better suited to the task they're being used to accomplish, and even combine multiple different components into compound tools. In some cases, tool use is an innate behavior, such as how woodpecker finches instinctively use twigs to probe for insects among crevices in trees, while in others it needs to be learned, like how some populations of orangutans have learned to use leaves to modulate their calls to make them sound larger and more threatening. While tool use isn't unique to sophonts, the greater ability to manipulate the environment that it provides does facilitate the transition to Oligosapiens. Tool use in human ancestors goes back at least 3 million years, and rapidly developed to the point of becoming indispensable for their survival. The Paleotext will undertake the first steps in this transition as a byproduct of the male's nest-building behaviors, using stones as anvils, cutting edges, and chisels to aid in the construction of their fortresses and to help them design more elaborate and ornate courtship displays. But it won't be long before they begin to extrapolate these principles to find ways of using...
Okay, now I see they're using spears. Can they effectively throw, is my question. Also, this is funny, I will say that. This looks kind of funny, but also... Can they throw? Because I know throwing is a thing that's apparently difficult for a lot of creatures, especially throwing accurately. I believe it's like chimpanzees and stuff. They can throw things, but like as far as I go, like a baseball or like a football, like to throw it accurately, especially over like a good distance, or even like I would say like a spear, like. It takes a separate mechanic. I know they're not throwing. I'm just wondering if it was possible for them because, they're making a spear. Uh, no throw zone. I got you. Okay, so they're not throwing these things. They're more using them as like traditional spears. Uh, just wondering if they could in the future. They can still use it, and that's the more impressive thing. I'm not really worried if the animal can throw it in the wild if I'm there in real life. I'm more impressed that they created that in the first place. Tying it up seems like the craziest part, and they already figured that out. Uh, it's kind of crazy.
Tools to gather food more efficiently, creating digging tools to assist in searching for tubers and fossorial prey, and constructing rings of stones within the shallows of rivers and lakes to confine acanthopods, like the fish traps that innumerable different cultures on Earth have used for thousands of years, some of which are among the oldest known archaeological sites on Earth. Tools will also be a crucial force multiplier by which the paleotechs can compensate for their lack of strength and natural weapons, letting them hunt prey much larger than they could tackle ordinarily by fashioning rocks, sticks, and bones into spears, axes, and other weapons. Their sexually selected urge to constantly innovate and discover new ways of modifying their environment may even lead them to find ways to control and create fire. While there are a few known instances of non-human animals using fire, such as kites and brown falcons that collect burning sticks during wildfires and use them to spread the flames to flush prey into the open, humans are the only animals to have learned to create fire. Tentative evidence for the controlled use of fire in humans goes back over 1 million years to early hominins like Homo erectus, and was a critical precursor for much of their later technology. For the paleotechs, fire will be a crucial means of keeping warm, the desiccated vegetation during the long dry winters serving as ideal kindling, but they'll also make ample use of it as a weapon in hunting, wielding flaming sticks and torches to drive prey into areas of hazardous terrain like cliff edges and narrow...
This is actually insane, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is actually really insane here. Like, just thinking about this right now, I'm like, whoa. Think about where we started, and now we're here. We're all the way at the point where these things are actually making this is what we used to do. They're just like us for real. They're doing the things that we used to do, possibly at a better level, possibly faster and better than how we did it at the same times of when we were doing it. I'm telling you, give them a couple of, thousands, 100,000s of years, maybe 1 million. Who knows? These things may actually be the creatures in those movies where it's like, oh, these creatures came down to Earth, and then they looked at us, and we're like, whoa. I'm not going down there. These guys are kind of dumb. Let me just go to another planet that's got some creatures that aren't doing so much dumb stuff to each other. But yeah, they might be one of those creatures that look at us, because they're like, oh man, let's check out the stars in a couple million years. Who knows? Yeah, we started off as weird underwater centipedes, and now look at us. Now we're smart spiders. Yeah. Whoa. What happened to the sound?
Their technological prowess, with edges and narrow torches to drive prey into areas of hazardous terrain like cliff edges and narrow passes. However, despite their technological prowess, one category of tool that the paleotechs will notably lack is thrown weaponry. As a legacy of their arboreal ancestors, humans have extremely flexible arms, dexterous hands, and binocular vision, all of which made them pre-adapted for throwing projectiles, providing a way of hunting large and dangerous prey from a safe distance once they became ground-dwelling predators, which selected for modified arm bones and improved hand-eye coordination to make them as proficient with ranged weaponry as possible. While there are other animals that employ ranged attacks, like archerfish, and some species like chimpanzees and other primates are known to occasionally throw things, humans are capable of throwing faster and with greater accuracy than any other animal. However, nothing in the paleotech's evolutionary history will have given them the same kind of forelimb flexibility, so they won't be capable of throwing anything with the speed or force necessary to significantly...
This is incredible. Shout outs to who made this animation. I actually really like this.
...their prey.
Let's
so
see
their
this.
throwing history will have given...
And also, I do love how I bring this up and then they do talk about it like very soon. Uh, we became smart by tripping. Yes. Um, I've heard of that theory about the magic mushrooms. Joe Rogan may have been one of the worst things that ever happened to podcasting or people talking. But you know what? Who knows if he's right, or if the information he heard about the mushroom thing being real is, I don't know if that's real or not. I don't have enough evidence to dispute it. I will say part of my dispute will be that I heard it from Joe Rogan. So, that's going to be part of the rebuttal of the Joe Rogan take, is that Joe Rogan did say it. So, that's just my thing. Finish my next batch of for episode 7 for the Pano organisms. That's what's up. That's what's up. Hey, you were able to finish that out through all this nonsense that I was talking the whole time. Uh, I know it's off topic, but I'm glad you did. I'm glad you brought it up. But yeah, okay. So here's my question and or possible theory. I think because they can't throw things and they haven't thought of that, they will probably eventually think of projectile weaponry. I think that is something that's going to come into play in their behaviors. But the fire equals more food theory holds a bit more water. Yeah, I think the theory that when we created fire, we started just cooking foods, and that naturally just helped build more proteins, and just help give us our body more things to make material with, and just better fats and stuff like that we were just eating. Maybe our brains expanded from there, but who really knows? I'm not 100% sure. Again, Joe Rogan may have been right, but part of my argument against him is that Joe Rogan himself is the first person I've heard to say that. So there's that. Shout out to everybody throwing all the emojis up there. I appreciate that. I haven't seen a lot of these before, but I do appreciate you guys throwing them up there. I really love that, guys. Keep that stuff up. We cooked the mushrooms. Possibly, again, we may have cooked the mushrooms to become smart, but then that also implies that would it be one specific clade ate the mushrooms, and then that one became the most dominant? This is before, when everyone's still interconnected. If that theory of the migration theory is accurate, that the one group did that and then they expanded, or was it mushrooms just appeared all over and everyone just so happened to find the magic mushrooms wherever they lived? Did people in China already go there and then find the mushrooms and become more, intelligent, or did were the mushrooms already on the way there? Were they just eating mushrooms on the trip? We found these in Africa, we just brought them all around. That would be my question, or slash rebuttal, just to figure that one out. I would need to know more evidence on that. It doesn't hold on its own. Yeah, the mushroom theory on its own doesn't hold much water. Yeah, not much, but I'm not completely throwing it out there. I don't want to completely throw it away, but it is, there are questions that we have to ask about that.
Than the same kind of forelimb flexibility, so they won't be capable of throwing anything with the speed or force necessary to significantly wound their prey. So they'll instead use close-ranged weapons as their most common hunting tools. On a similar note, early humans owed much of their success to persistence hunting, with adaptations in their bones and muscles helping them maintain stamina over long distances, letting them pursue prey for hours on end until it succumbs to exhaustion. This is complemented by a higher density of eccrine sweat glands than any other mammal, and a reduced covering of fur so sweat can evaporate more easily, keeping them cool during the intense exertion of keeping up with their quarry. However, the paleotecs are adapted to chase their prey only over short distances, and will only travel far from their territory when absolutely necessary, and so will instead rely much more on ambush tactics. Fortunately for them, prey will naturally be drawn to the watering holes and patches of vegetation that they establish their territories around, letting them use and modify the surrounding landscape to aid in their hunting strategies, constructing pit traps that prey is funneled into by carefully positioned walls and fences, or even containing prey within enclosures, which may one day lead to the development of domestication. As the paleotechs develop a larger and larger scope of behaviours over a period of several million years, their ever-expanding brains, along with other incidental adaptations that occur along the way, will eventually reach a degree of differentiation from their ancestors to result in the emergence of a new genus, one that we'll call Neotecton, who will take their ancestors' technological sophistication to a level where they can no longer survive without it, at which point they'll have completed the transition to obligate sapience, and with their ability to modify their environment to suit their needs, they'll achieve an unprecedented level of success. Once an obligate sophont develops technologies that allow it to survive independently of environmental conditions, it will no longer be restricted to any particular region or habitat, and the need to provide resources for its growing populations will inevitably force it to spread across the planet.
True.
Although the majority of hominin genetic diversity has remained concentrated in Africa where they first evolved, humans have undertaken many multitudinous waves of migration over the last 2 million years, and have spread to every corner of the globe, even remote islands thousands of kilometers from the mainland. Each of these migrations occurred over only a few tens of thousands of years, a timescale far too rapid for the biotas they invaded to adapt to, which, along with the unstable climate of the Younger Dryas, was the main cause of the late Pleistocene extinctions, with the arrival of humans into most regions being immediately followed by a 60 to 80% reduction in local megafaunal diversity.
Dang.
The Neotects, however, are nowhere near as nomadic as early humans, so their colonization of the...
Is this a boat already? They already figured out boats? Okay, figuring out boats may be the most impressive thing I've seen so far. Like, I think this is like, I think this is actually crazy right here. Sadly, we caused the extinction of mammoths. Yeah, I have heard about that. You know, and look how non-human they are. Yeah, I know. I actually do like that. I like the non-human look.
Planet will be comparatively slow, although still very fast on the timescale of evolution. And despite the eruptions in the southern mountains, the hothouse period that their planet is currently undergoing will be much less hostile than the Ice Age climate that exacerbated the...
Wait, I mean, I don't know how long boats been around. I'll be honest here. I'm not a boat guy. You know, I've never been the captain of a ship before, so I don't have the history of boats. I just kind of figure it's been probably like, if I were to put a date on it without looking up any information, I would say boats 5,000 years. I would say boats are like 5,000 years old. Maybe I'm off by a lot, you know? Like millions of years ago, probably. Okay, that's crazy. Because I said 5,000 years, and I'm going to, you know, I feel like that's a good amount of time for us to do a lot of stuff with boats. At least 1 million years. Okay, that's very different than 5,000. Okay, so I'll give you that. Maybe we were working on boats for way longer than I expected. Like 1 is 60s old times much. Okay. Much more simple boats. Okay, I mean, yeah, much more simple boats, but. Again, even the idea of a boat, I imagine, took a long time to take off. But of course, they're like, yo, I want to get across that water, you know, which makes sense. They saw a log do it, and then they were like, what's the best idea of like getting on a log, you know, or a canoe? Yeah, more like a canoe. Yeah, what's the best way to get across that? I've already seen a log float. Can I get on the log and still float? And then that idea just expanded from there. So okay, maybe even early humans and other creatures would immediately see that and be like, let me put the connection together. A long time ago in human scale, yeah, planetary scale, it is not nothing, but human scale, that's like, whoa, those humans were like super geniuses. These guys are also super geniuses. Because that's like a really good boat right there.
Late Pleistocene extinctions, meaning the early Neotechs' impact on the environment won't be quite as severe as humans, although they're still likely to cause considerable ecological disruption in the areas they colonize. Eventually, the neotechs will manage to disperse into every available habitat across the supercontinent, a process that will occur gradually enough for them to diverge into many different species along the way. However, if human history is any indication, most of these descendant species will be short-lived. Of the 20 or so species of hominins, Homo sapiens is the sole living representative, and even then, the last common ancestor of every living human outside of Africa today is believed to have left Africa within only the last 70,000 years, with all of the other migrations over the past 2 million years leaving behind no descendants.
Oh wow.
It's still not known how much the relative success of Homo sapiens is due to them actively outcompeting and interbreeding with the other species and driving them to extinction, or if the bigger factor was simply the harsh climate of the late Pleistocene that the others were unable to endure. Again, the relatively hospitable climate during the neotechs migrations will give them a marginally higher success rate than those of early humans, and while Paleotecton and most species of Neotecton will eventually die out, a select few species will achieve long-term success. The first species of Neotect, which we'll call Neotecton atavus, will spread northward from the southern steppe and establish a presence in the tropics, from which will arise many new species. This will be a very different environment to the one in which their ancestors evolved, so over several 100,000 years, some populations will adapt to become slightly more tolerant of hotter climates, with longer, thinner limbs and smaller, more gracile bodies with a lighter coat of fur, resulting in a new species that we'll call Neotecton gracilis. But one final species will emerge around 100,000 years later within the eastern plains, and it will be this species, whether by sheer luck or by some slight adaptive or technological advantage, that will find the greatest success and go on to colonize the majority of the planet, for which reason we'll name them Neotecton ecumenes. The competition from Neotecton ecumenes will force the others
New builder of the inhabited world, I love that name.
Into decline, but Neotecton gracilis and perhaps a few other species will still survive, at least for a time, in small, isolated pockets in the far reaches of the supercontinent, while Neotecton ecumenes will proliferate across the entire globe and proliferate into thousands of ethnicities and cultures, their technology letting them exert an ever greater command over their environment as they do so. But no matter how capable a Sophont is of learning new behaviors and adapting to new circumstances, no matter how far its culture and technology progresses, it will always be tethered to some extent to the innate behaviors of its ancestors, as technological and societal developments occur over such an absurdly rapid timescale in comparison with the rate of evolutionary change that the species' instincts can't adapt fast enough to keep up, and will be maintained even after they become obsolete or maladaptive, a phenomenon for which we'll coin the term instinctual lag. Humans would certainly like to think of themselves as being in full control over their own thoughts and behaviors, and as wholly rational creatures that are totally divorced from the natural world. But in reality, much of human psychology is beholden to pre-programmed instincts that directly result from the ecological circumstances under which their ancestors first...
Real. Like, so many people think that we're above all this. Absolutely not. Have you guys talked to people? Like, have you guys actually had to do something where you talk to a bunch of people on a daily basis? You start to realize humans ain't top tier. You know, we might be cool. Like, we're up there, but we can't be top tier because this is like, we got so far to go. Yeah, we force, we made love in caves, forced to pay taxes. That might be on my gravestone right there. I don't know why, but I feel like I love that statement and I want that to be like on my headstone one day. So shout outs to you. I love that. Don't ever change, please. That's why we get angry for silly reasons. Exactly. Like, sometimes I get angry even if I have to like repeat myself to a person in person. I'm like, why am I actually angry about this? That's a weird thing to be upset about this when they just want clarification. But, you know, it's like, what's up with that? Am I the asshole is the real thing. It's why we get jealous. Exactly. I don't know why we get jealous. I hope I hope we can get rid of that part, but because that started so many wars. It's it's why we have wars in the first place. This whole thing is crazy.
Evolved. Homo sapiens only evolved about 300,000 years ago, and all of recorded history has only occurred within the last 5,000 years.
Real, you stub your toe and start yelling at the chair. Like, what did the chair do but exist in a world where you're not paying attention? Crazy, crazy that I'm a chair just living in a world where this person who owns a chair doesn't pay attention to where the chair is. But you yell at the chair like it's its fault, like it just moved in the direction of your toe. It didn't. You just weren't paying attention, but you yell at the chair all you want.
A period of time far too brief to allow any significant genetic changes to occur, meaning the innate behaviors that evolved in response to the pressures faced by early humans still persist, despite the fact that technological and cultural advancements have completely eliminated many of those pressures. For example, the struggle for dominance within the social group selected for humans to react with aggression when they perceive their status as being challenged, which can be triggered in modern humans even in situations in which hostility is entirely irrational or counterproductive. When they overcome a competitor, humans also feel a sense of triumph for asserting their dominance, an emotional reward so alluring that modern humans create and engage in artificial contests like competitive sports and other games, which, although completely unnecessary and inconsequential for their survival, still provide the thrill of victory thanks to instinctual lag. When faced with danger, modern humans also still exhibit the same fight or flight response as early humans, marked by an elevated heart rate, increased blood pressure, and hyperventilation in anticipation of the physical demands of fending off an opponent or escaping danger, despite the fact that these physiological responses aren't helpful at all in tackling the types of stress-inducing situations that modern humans usually deal with. Of course, technological and cultural developments can do a lot to change a Sophon's behaviors from their ancestral state, but some traces of their evolutionary history will always remain, and the Neotechs will be no exception. At the most basic level, a Sophon's psychology will be shaped by its senses. Humans are very visually oriented animals, having inherited keen eyesight from their primate ancestors, most notably when it comes to color vision. While birds and reptiles typically have 4 different types of color-receptive cone cells, most mammals only have 2, which may be a vestige of their early nocturnal ancestors prioritizing night vision over color vision. But primates are some of the only mammals to have separate cones for red, blue, and green light, which they may have evolved to help them spot brightly colored fruit in the forest canopy. However, this has come at the expense of their night vision, and consequently, humans are very strongly diurnal animals, with fear of the dark being a near universal human experience, and darkness being associated with evil across virtually all cultures. On the other hand, the Neotechs, having evolved from predominantly nocturnal ancestors, will have much more acute night vision than humans, and thus have no such fear of darkness. If anything, the bright sunlight of midday might elicit an agoraphobic response, signaling the time at which the diurnal predators are most active. Meanwhile, their color vision will be limited to hues of yellow and blue, which will also influence how they conceptualize their surroundings. To human eyes, red tends to stand out more than other colors in most environments, and so is commonly used to signify danger, urgency, or simply importance. But not only can the Neotechs not distinguish red from green, but the pigmentation of the chemophytes will give most terrestrial environments a red backdrop, making it a much more neutral color for them. However, bright blue and green are the colors most frequently used in aposematic displays, particularly in poisonous malacoforms like the chloroderms and cyanoderms, which the Neotechs' malacovorous ancestors would have evolved to avoid, so they may associate this range of colors with danger. In fact, particular hues of bright blue and green, arranged in patterns that resemble those of especially poisonous malacoforms, may even provoke an innate disgust
That's actually really cool. I actually really love this. Like, the whole, like, their visual, like, looks and everything, like, and how it would look for them. I love seeing this, because also, like, what's the whole thing of, like, humans? We don't know what colors look like for other people, for real. Yeah, blue equals danger for these guys. You see something that's purple and kind of brownish. Just like, yo, stay away from that.
Resemble those of especially poisonous malacoforms may even
Lavender?
provoke
Get
an
away
innate
from that
disgust
thing.
or fear response. This aversion to certain visual stimuli isn't unprecedented. Tropical birds raised in captivity have been observed to instinctively avoid bands of color that resemble those of coral snakes, despite having never seen coral snakes before. And there's even some tentative evidence that humans are disproportionately quick to notice elongated serpentine shapes, which has controversially been suggested to be the vestiges of an instinct to recognize and avoid venomous snakes, the so-called snake detection hypothesis. In contrast to their keen vision, most primates have a relatively poor sense of smell, especially humans, whose olfactory bulbs have undergone severe reduction over the course of their evolution. But for the neotexts, smell contributes just as much as sight to the sensory tapestry from which they derive their understanding of the world.
True.
Their scent markings will provide a record of the health, status, mood, and familiarity of those around them, acting like olfactory name tags on everything within the clan's territory, which will inform how they conceptualize identity and ownership of property. When it comes to taste, human ancestors, like many other primates, evolved a high proportion of sweet receptors to encourage them to seek out the sugar-rich fruit that formed a crucial component of their diet, which, thanks to instinctual...
Bro, who did that, bro? This guy is the reason why I like snacks so much. You might actually have to catch these hands one day. Because why did you do that all the way back then? You wanted the sweetest fruits. And guess what? Congratulations. That trait passed down. Now I like Sprite and Coca-Cola. So are you who's going to pay for the healthcare? You own a lot of, now we have diabetes. Exactly. Now we have diabetes. Congratulations. This is why I love candy. It's because one guy was just like, you know what? Let's just eat the sweetest stuff. This is actually really good. And you know what? He was right. It is good. But look what you did. Now we have Coca-Cola. Now Coca-Cola exists. We got these things for $1, which honestly they probably should be like 50 cents or something. But whatever. Well, candy corn should be free because who's eating
modern
candy
human
corn?
Still crave sugar, despite their technology allowing them to produce and obtain it in excessive and unhealthy quantities. The neotexts, on the other hand, don't derive much of their nutrition from frugivory, and so much like cats, hyenas, seals, and other predominantly carnivorous animals, will have no sensitivity to sweetness, instead having taste receptors that detect chemicals present in meat. But one of the aspects of their biology that will have the greatest influence over the development of their cultures will be their reproduction, the distinction between breeders and non-breeders being viewed as a critically important division that permeates every facet of society. Having children won't be seen as a right or an expectation like it is in many human societies, but as a privilege available only to those who've earned breeding status, which will be considered a huge life accomplishment that the helpers will aspire to achieve during their lifetime. For the non-breeders, especially the females, any display of sexual interest will be extremely taboo, and interpreted as a challenge to the breeder's dominance.
This is so crazy, but also the metaphorical at the same time of two young lovers, but then their love actually challenges the queen just for existing because she's the only one that should be able to breed, because that's how the hierarchy works. And then you're doing this challenges the hierarchy, which isn't good. And also, if you kind of look at it, these kind of look like exclamation points, the teeth. So it's kind of like they're also surprised, but also it's like a double entendre type thing. It's a whole metaphorical artistic thing. You guys gotta have that type of artistic vision for it, but yeah, I love where this is.
Extremely taboo, and interpreted as a challenge to the breeder's dominance. Since dominance is strongly correlated with age, most cultures will be very reverent of their elders, even after they pass the peak of physical health. The breeders will be responsible for duties relating to government, politics, and managing affairs between clans, while the non-breeders will be responsible for domestic tasks, assigned duties according to their individual aptitudes, including hunting, foraging, fighting, and caring for the grubs. Looking after the grubs will be a collective effort, the preponderance of males among the helpers leading to child rearing being seen as a chiefly masculine task. And since the breeders play a minimal role in looking after the young, the grubs will form no stronger of an emotional bond with their parents than with any other member of the clan. As a way of motivating the helpers to tend to the young, traits associated with juveniles will provoke an instinctive urge to provide care. Humans are so susceptible to the so-called baby schema, marked by a disproportionately large head and eyes and overall rounded features, that even non-human babies can trigger it. However, the blind and practically boneless grubs of the neotechs will lead the helpers to evolve nurturing instincts triggered by soft, worm-like bodies with short limbs and small or absent eyes, in which case they might regard animals like the neotenic apodomorphs and some of the brachyschelids with the same degree of cuteness that humans do with puppies and kittens.
That's hilarious. They're just looking at these little worms with arms like, oh my gosh, look at this thing. Oh, look at this little squiggly little worm. Like, I want to cuddle it so bad. That's what I love. They're just like, oh my God, look how cute it is. I want one. We can't afford to have one of these, okay? We're already struggling, I'm trying to get up to become, the top of the dominance. I'm like 3 chains away from being the dominant female. We can't afford to have one of these snakes with arms at the house right now, okay? Maybe once I can become the actual matriarch, then we can talk about this. But until that time, Billy, we're not having this conversation again, okay? We can't, but please, we can't have children. It's illegal. Okay, maybe we'll think about this. Maybe the pets. Maybe the pets would be a good idea in a situation where only certain people can have kids. Maybe pets might be a good idea.
Queuing behavior by which helpers earn breeding status will also shape their cultural organization. Like their primate relatives, human ancestors lived in societies with high levels of mate competition and flexible dominance hierarchies that were constantly rearranged as group members vied with one another for higher rank, which selected for instincts that manifest in modern humans as a drive to continuously advance their status, reputation, and wealth, and to make themselves appear as attractive and enviable as possible. As such, humans are extremely attentive to how they're perceived by others, reacting with aggression when their social standing is challenged and embarrassment when their public image is tarnished. In the Neotet clans, however, social mobility is much more limited, as dominance among the females is almost entirely a function of age, so jockeying for higher status would be interpreted as a challenge to the established order that would be met with disapproval and condemnation from the other clan members, and in some cases would be punishable by eviction. Instead, the most reliable way for a Neotet to gain status will simply be to wait for a gap to open in the hierarchy, rewarding those who are patient and obedient, content to only accept material possessions that are necessary or befitting of their station. Their view of sex and gender will be strongly shaped by their protandry, conceptualized as an outgrowth of one's personality and not the other way around, and the fact that males can become female, but not vice versa, will imbue gender with a directionality that corresponds to life stage and maturity. Masculinity and femininity won't be thought of as contrasting or mutually exclusive concepts, or as occupying opposite ends of a spectrum, but rather masculinity will be seen as the default or expected state, especially among juveniles and helpers, while femininity will be seen as a modification upon masculinity, a quality that's attained over the course of one's life, achieved only by those with sufficient strength, determination, and discipline.
I don't know, I'm starting to feel like this, I feel like there's some humans out there that would probably be like, you know what, maybe this is how humans work too. Maybe we are gender fluid by nature, and maybe because babies are violent. We can agree that most babies have a natural tendency towards violence, which can be seen as a masculine trait. But then over time, people evolved into things that people would qualify as feminine traits. Like understanding your feelings. People consider that a feminine trait, but that is something that you kind of have to learn over time. That's not something that like naturally comes to most people. So are we in the same, type of spectrum as this? Is this kind of represent us because the things that, we inherently consider more feminine traits are usually things that you kind of have to learn throughout the course of your life. That's because you view, our view of gender is a spectrum. Um, you know what? Maybe I am a gender fluid alien spider. Okay. Alongside tomboys, girls who have traditionally masculine traits. Shout outs to all my tomboys out there. You know, I'll I'm not gonna say you're one of the boys, but shout outs to all you guys, especially the ones who really know about sports. I really mess with that. I'm a sports guy, so sometimes you just want people to hang out and talk about sports with, that's all. Or femboys, yes, shout outs to all the femboys out there. Huge fan of you guys. That's a whole nother situation though. But shout outs to all the um, tomboys and femboys. Crazy how they both have boys in their name. Maybe they should the femboys be fem girls, or should the tomboys be like tom girls? Tomboys rule. They truly do. But should tomboys be like tom girls? Because we can't have femboys and tomboys. It feels like now we're just throwing boys into everything. One of them should still be girls, right? Either one. You guys, okay? You guys figure that one out. We're gonna send the video, but you guys figure out whether tomboy should change or femboy should change. I just feel like one of them should be acknowledged as girls within the name.
With the relatively few grubs who are born as females being seen as prodigies, displaying readiness for leadership from birth. And since they'll have no way of understanding how or why the change from male to female occurs, it will likely be the subject of magical thinking in many cultures, who may attribute it to the will of a higher power that has specifically chosen the individual to one day rule the clan. Although strength, courage, and tenacity will be seen as admirable feminine qualities, females will also be expected to meet very high standards of subservience to the breeders, or else face the shame of being disowned by their clan, and as such they'll have a greater investment than males in upholding and enforcing the clan's traditions and cultural precepts. Whereas females will tend to be conformist and authoritarian, males will have a greater drive for novelty and innovation, having a natural urge to reshape their living spaces into exhibitions of their individuality, which will be a ubiquitous and vital means of self-expression. Architecture, civil engineering, and urban planning will be viewed as highly respected masculine art forms, to the extent that many elements of the structure and organization of human cities would seem bleak and utilitarian to them. As their ancestors were so dependent on their territories and so rarely ventured into the perilous wastelands beyond, they'll have a much greater sense of place attachment than humans and be more hesitant to travel far from home. Especially the females, since ordinarily they only depart from their territory if rejected by the matriarch and expelled from the dominance hierarchy, causing them to experience intense stress if separated from their clan for prolonged periods.
Oh wow.
The female's queuing behavior will naturally lead to matrilineal descent in most cultures, the ownership of property passed down through the female line. The males, on the other hand, can't rely on inheritance to earn wealth or status, so for them, leaving their home clan will present an opportunity to garner wider renown and find mating opportunities. Whereas a female leaving her home clan will be considered a mark of shame, in males it will be seen as ambitious and enterprising, and in many societies, exchanging males between clans will serve to establish alliances and be a common component of trade agreements. Of course, there will be countless thousands of cultures that emerge as the neotech spread across the planet, each one with different customs according to their environment and their specific history, but all of them will adapt their behaviors from this same instinctual foundation. But one byproduct of instinctual lag that all of their cultures will certainly have in common is a sense of morality. The success of any social group will depend on the cooperation of all of its members, who will therefore be selected to behave altruistically towards each other and to develop strong bonds of empathy with one another, especially among family members, since, as Hamilton's rule describes, the inclusive fitness gained from an altruistic act is directly proportional to the degree of relatedness between the individuals involved. Inevitably, however, there will always be some who try to cheat the system by contributing as little as possible while taking advantage of the other group members' efforts. Such selfishness will pose a danger to the whole group, so cooperation will need to be enforced by punishing or exiling those who don't pull their weight. These social instincts form the basis of morality, with behaviors that contribute to the success of the group forming a conception of goodness, encompassing virtues like compassion, temperance, and diligence, whereas the concept of evil is derived from selfish behaviors that benefit the individual at the expense of the group, like greed, negligence, hatred, and especially murder, and the drive to discourage and punish such evil acts results in a notion of justice and vengeance. This basic moral framework is likely to be universal among sophonts, as it naturally arises from the instincts necessary for a functioning social system, although there may be some variation in what behaviors are seen as good or evil based on how the group dynamic operates. For instance, in the case of the Neotects, the distribution of resources in their ancestors' habitat meant that collectively caring for the offspring of only a few breeding pairs was ultimately the best way to guarantee fitness for everyone in the clan. So having children without the explicit approval of the rest of the group may be considered an act of evil, or at least selfishness. However, while the evolution of sociality provides the foundation for morality and cooperation, paradoxically, it's also responsible for some of the most dangerous and lamentable aspects of human nature. Evolution only incentivizes altruism between organisms with sufficient relatedness or who live in close enough association with each other for acts of altruism to be reciprocated. In other words, morality will only be upheld among members of the same social group, whereas there's no evolutionary impetus to extend any goodwill to those outside the group, who only represent a source of competition. Therefore, social species will face a strong pressure to distinguish their in-group from their out-group, to sort the others around them into categories of us versus them, selectively applying empathy only to the former while reacting to the latter with aggression. One way of distinguishing group membership is by physical appearance, as the high degree of relatedness within a group will result in some measure of family resemblance, whereas outsiders will have a distinct genetic history that will likely leave some apparent visual differences, the instinct to selectively apply or withhold empathy based on these differences forming the origin of xenophobia and racism.
Yeah.
Alongside this, the need to protect...
Guys, I know this is going to be a bold statement here, but follow along with me. Racism is bad. I know. Some people are getting crazy. Some people are going to hear that and be like, whoa, guy, what are you saying? Trust me. Follow me on this. Prejudice, bad. Don't do it. Racism is bad. Don't do it. Xenophobia is bad. Don't do it. You know why I think xenophobia is also crazy? Because, like, especially in these days, we're like such an interconnected world that, like, people from other countries have seen my videos before without even, like, fully knowing, like, they weren't taught this language. You know, there are some people who are not, in America watching this, and it's like, what is going on? It's literally invented spider racism. Yes. It's like, we don't need these claims here. We don't need to have these things anymore. We're so interconnected more than ever. Like, we could just, like, we could just all be getting to know each other on a constant day-to-day basis. But some people are still ignorant and they have prejudice and racism. And you know what? Hopefully those people are starting to get more educated, or at least, getting old and possibly, passing on. So at the very minimum, it's going to take another couple of 100 years. But maybe, we're on, it seems like we're on the right path to people being more interconnected and less xenophobic and prejudiced towards each other. We're all one race here. It's just something that we're working through. It's one of those traits that, it didn't evolve with us in enough time. If we had more time, we would have had no prejudice, but we didn't have time. You know, that's just one of those inherent traits where we're like, oh, othering people. That's just a internal, a trait that we have from back in the day. We got to get over that though. One day, we can buy a ticket and be in China tomorrow. You know what? If you buy the ticket, maybe I'll join you. We also got to have a plan on where we got to stay, though. And also, is it going to be the whole group, or is it just going to be me and you? There's a few more questions I got to ask about this, but you know what? I might be down for China tomorrow.
Protect the group's local resources from rivals selects for an instinct to define one's in-group based on territory, only extending bonds of solidarity to those within a largely arbitrary boundary, while viewing those beyond it as being fundamentally different, which surfaces in modern humans as patriotism and nationalism.
True.
Humans also distinguish their in-group from their out-group based on ideology, deriving a large part of their identity, especially their affiliation with their in-group, from their beliefs, and naturally associating more readily with individuals who share similar opinions and perspectives. One would think it would be adaptive for a Sophon to be willing to revise and update their worldview in response to new information, and to welcome the prospect of encountering beliefs that differ from their own, the resulting exchange of ideas allowing them to form a more accurate understanding of the world. But the in-group biases around which human psychology is orientated means that, as much as humans pride themselves on their grasp of logic and reason, they all too often fall victim to thought traps and irrational thinking. Being so protective of their ideology makes them highly susceptible to belief perseverance, maintaining a belief despite being presented with evidence that contradicts or invalidates it, which is exacerbated by the pattern-loving instincts mentioned earlier, their compulsion to find significance even in randomness making them prone to confirmation bias, only taking account of data points that support what they already believe and ignoring those that don't fit their preconceptions, by which they can become entirely convinced of claims and notions that are completely unsubstantiated. This conceptual and
real. That's why I like being. I mean, I guess is one of the things I like about being a human is that like we can openly be like, oh, maybe I'm contradicting myself right now. It's just one of those things. Cherry picking, to be frank, yeah. Cherry picking is kind of fun sometimes, though. Yeah. But who am I? I don't know. I just like it is an interesting thing that we do this. Sometimes you see some facts and you're like, yeah, I see that fact you got there, but I have this belief. And one of those facts, I'm not so sure about if it agrees with this belief I have here. So I'm going to ignore that one and go by these other facts that I do still believe goes with the core belief that I have. It's such a funny thing that us humans do. I do it myself. I can't think of a great example of one right now, but I'm sure you guys can comment that down below.
Flexibility is so hardwired.
Comment down my contradictions, ladies and gentlemen. It's your time to shine. Tell me how much of a contrarian or asshole I am or am not, possibly.
To the human brain that having one's core beliefs challenged activates the same neural pathway as an external threat, and can consequently trigger an aggressive response. This instills a fear of being rebuked for holding beliefs or opinions that differ from the rest of the in-group, and promotes a desire to be seen as like-minded with those around them, resulting in herd mentality and ideological homogenization. Although these impulses have long since become vestigial in modern humans, instinctual lag means that they persist regardless, and pose an ever-increasing threat to the success and longevity of human civilization, the alienation and vilification of the outgroup cultivating intolerance and conflict, the drive to accumulate wealth and status for oneself and one's in-group at the expense of others manifesting as greed and over-exploitation of the environment, the devotion to their convictions motivating the rejection of scientific and rational thought in favor of blind loyalty to ideological allegiances.
Wait, did this guy just have a sign that says, I love CO2? That's such... What? Like, that's just such a weird sign, right? Like, we can agree that that's a weird sign to be making. Like, okay.
Rational thought in favor of blind loyalty to ideological allegiances. Regrettably, these instinctual hang-ups seem to be an inescapable byproduct of the evolution of sociality, meaning they may well be common among obligate sophonts throughout the universe. In fact, since
People
the
love
ultimate
CO2.
root of the us
I guess
versus
so.
them mentality is competition for resources,
Not you,
we
though.
can
I got you.
speculate that the greater the
people
resource
love money, that's
scarcity in the
true.
environment in which a sophont first evolves, the greater the extent that their psychology will revolve around in-group versus out-group biases, with the proviso that habitats where resources are particularly abundant probably won't be conducive to the evolution of sapience in the first place. In this regard, the neotects are at something of a disadvantage,
That's why
as
we
their
have
social
taxes.
structure evolved in response to the patchy distribution of resources across the otherwise barren habitat in which the paleotects first evolved, selecting for a high degree of territoriality and hostility towards other clans, which is very likely to hinder their cooperation.
I don't want that guy to start trying to breathe CO2, but he did say he loved it. Has he ever been in a room full of it? That would be my only question. Have you ever been in a room full of CO2 before? You're saying you love it. Have you ever tried to put yourself in a room with nothing but CO2? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know how much you're going to say you love it after that experience. If you are able to communicate with people on this side of the mortal plane after being in the room filled with nothing but CO2. But you know what? Again, that's just that's a me opinion, and this may be why we have to pay taxes because of other things in life. Like people, who knows where that guy would be if it wasn't for our tax dollars? You know what I mean?
Societal development. Indeed, cooperative breeding, and especially eusociality, are correlated with high levels of aggression between groups. Meerkats have the highest death rate from intercolonial violence of any mammal, and ants and termites typically kill any individual they encounter whose scent they don't recognize, and colonies in proximity to one another frequently end up wiping each other out. Just like humans, the neotects' history will be rife with war, prejudice, exploitation, and bloodshed, a tragic legacy of their evolutionary history, and one that perhaps all sapient life will need to contend with, possibly even acting as the so-called great filter that prevents life from being more common in the universe, for it may be that all too often sophonts end up destroying themselves. However, the neotects' intelligence and imagination will also let them find ways around conflict, like negotiation and bartering, culminating in the establishment of trade networks by which different clans form alliances and eventually aggregate into unified societies, which will allow technological innovations to spread among larger populations and knowledge to be more efficiently circulated, preserved, and passed on to future generations. Within the next few tens of thousands of years, the neotects will come to a critical turning point in their history. Constrained by instinctual lag, they can't rely on evolution to help their instincts keep pace with their cultural development. And while their technological advancement will let them increase the efficiency with which they can provide food and shelter to their populations and improve their standards of health, security, and overall quality of life, it will also heighten their capability to wage war and irreparably damage the planet around them, so that should they succumb to the obsolete impulses of their ancestors, they have the potential to unleash destruction on a scale even greater than the mass extinction that ended the previous era. Ultimately, the neotech's survival will depend on them coming to understand themselves, their own evolutionary story and that of the biosphere around them, and resolving to confront and change their own nature, abandoning their selfishness, greed, and intolerance, and letting curiosity, empathy, and altruism guide them to a peaceful and prosperous future. But whether or not they'll succeed, only time will tell.
Oh my gosh. Oh, what a beautiful story.
And so at last we come to the end.
Once again, shout outs to every one of these artists. Shout outs to this whole channel. I love this channel, bro. This is such an incredible idea for a series. And I know other people have done it. I've reacted to other series. But at the same time, because this was the first one that I have, I feel like I have a little bit of personal just reflection on this one. It's just so beautiful. I will say that was such a beautiful way to end this, and also to help start the journey of the new one. it's just like, oh my god. So what is the plan for future reactions now that this is done? Well, we do have to still do the Apano series. That episode 7 is coming out. But as I was saying earlier, I do want to get into more like non-science related videos coming up soon. So, obviously there may be days where we're reacting to things like a play or something, or maybe a movie if I can get it to where it's not copyrighted. Music is a little weird on YouTube with the copyright things, but I do want to, listen to some music maybe on live, hopefully. So I want to get into other projects that may not be as scientifically related, but are just still like entertaining things for us to just check out and watch. Maybe nothing like too crazy or like too ignorant here. I'm not trying to like be watching like fight videos or nothing, but maybe like some anime related things, just different things like along those lines that would be fun and entertaining. Uh, should do gaming or something. I was thinking about doing gaming. I almost got on here and just did Rivals all day because I wanted to see, have you guys see the progress of Rogue and stuff like that. Because I'll be honest, I'm a pretty good Rogue. I just realized that. No, it's not. I didn't get fed up with the science. I'm just saying we got to diversify the channel. I'm not gonna be. People are gonna come to me and start thinking that I'm super science literate when I'm like, I might be like slightly smarter than average. Not super genius, but at least like middle of the line genius slash I might not be smart at all type thing. So it's one of the two. Where I'm like kind of a genius, or I'm just like, just yapping here. So and before people start to really figure that one out, I want to kind of switch it up, and then it's like, whoa, the super genius part, that might be the real. But then I'll get back to some science, and yeah, more religious stuff, more religious content. I do want to get more into that type of stuff as well. So we took a long few months journey into more deeply scientific related topics, but we will start to expand on that. The science ain't going away though. We're still gonna have scientific related topics. Overly sarcastic productions. I think I do have seen some of their videos before, but I think that actually might be like a good lane of like types of things to react to as well. Like, where it's like they kind of get into some detail on things, but they also are a little bit more on like the entertainment side of things where you're learning, but again, there's more of a focus on the keeping it entertaining. Truly coming to understand ourselves and our world. Yes. Do not watch my project. I don't say that. I may watch your project. It's not bad. Again, who knows what we're going to get into. But I just realized that this has been going on for 3 hours. So one of those things that I talked about earlier was contradictions in humans. And I said we were going to do this as well as other stuff. But here's the contradiction in myself as a human. I have to get ready for work tomorrow. So I am probably going to make this the video that we reacted to live today, because I do still have to put all these videos together, all 15 parts, into one video for you guys, which should be out later this week. So woo, sound effects here if I do add them in. Add a sound effect right here if you do. Future me who edits off like 15 plus hours of these videos and put them all together for these guys to watch. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to get through these artists though, because the artists did so much that they deserve credit and to be credited on this. For what they were able to do.
Long journey. I'd like to give a tremendous thank you to anyone and everyone who contributed to this series, including, but not limited to, all the artists on Discord, whose submissions have helped cut down the production time of these videos by an enormous margin and make them far more visually interesting than I could possibly do on my own. And of course, all the patrons, whose incredible generosity has made it possible for me to work on these videos full-time for almost 5 years.
Oh, wow.
This has been, without any shred of doubt, the single biggest and most ambitious project I've ever worked on. And there's no way I would have been able to see it through to its completion without all of your help and support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Wow. 5 years of effort into making this. Like, shout outs to all the guys who helped make this. You know, the vision. I see why this has such the fan base that it has. The fan base that actually seems to want to make sure that, like, it's getting the right, like, you're getting the right information from this, and you're not just like watching this just to, like, you know, watch this. So one video, you madman. it's 3 hours though, you know. It's like there's movies that haven't gone on as long as the stream went on for tonight. It's, you know, I'm sorry, it blocks, my face cam blocks the artist names. I'm sorry. We're gonna do that for the you know, the patrons there. Sorry patrons, but the artists themselves, I don't want to block their names, so you're right on that one. Again, and the art itself was, it just kept improving. Visions, thoughts for the future of this series. You know, again, I also am gonna go and do the next series that I just learned about from you guys earlier today. Apparently there's a second part to this series where they go over the Sapience species here, and I can't wait to just learn about that one. Fun fact, Dinosaur Dude and Tardigrade also made fan art for this episode, as well as fan art for my series. Hey, let's go. Wait, I think you told me about Dinosaur Dude as well, too. Hey, Tardigrade, that's him right there. Perfect timing on that one, by the way. So, yeah, shout outs to that. Very incredible. But yeah, man, this is such a great journey. It's only like 20 minutes, though. Hey, shout outs to it, bro. We're going to get into that stuff as well. Only has like 120-minute episode. When you talk about wait, no, oh, you're probably talking about something else here. I'm sorry. I think I've been yapping for a long time. I'm starting to get to the extra crazy yap zone. But yeah, we had a great time today, ladies and gentlemen. I will say, thoughts. I think that this species probably should get rid of the how they're doing their, you know, the breeding thing. This is going to be human bias here talking, but I like the way that we did it. That Strong Dinosaur Dude has 5 episodes of a series now. Hey, that's what's up. Conclusion, we learned a lot about our world and ourselves. Thank you and good night. Bro, you should have wrote that. I should have just said that as if I naturally was saying that. I read that as if I was reading it, but if I was more professional, I'd be like, and in conclusion, we learned a lot about ourselves, our world, and we learned a lot about our world and ourselves. Guys, thank you and good night. But yeah, we're gonna get into the other one. But guys, you already know my actual outro, which is, if you made it this far, especially in the live stream, I really do want to appreciate you. We had Jordan, Anthrax, I believe Tally, I believe you guys were all here from the very beginning of this you know, here. Like, it's actually insane that you guys stuck with me for 3 hours. Riley, I know you came in a little bit later, but you know, you were here for literally probably at least 2.5 hours or so. But yeah, we are gonna go ahead and get ready for bed. So as always, guys, thank you. Riley, I didn't forget about you. I just saved you for last. You know, you came in slightly later, so I just saved you for the ending there. But I didn't forget about you. But yes, as always, thank you. I love you.